Chapter 271. When Zhongshou heard that, he smiled. The sharpness in his eyes seemed to be able to see through everything. It is just a battle. What do I have to fear? Xian Yunlan's breathing stopped once more. She noticed that what Zhongshou said wasn't that the conflict today was all because of Qingyin's school, or that he mentioned the power behind him. He directly said that it was just a battle. What did he have to fear? He didn't explain, didn't avoid, didn't beat around the bush. Just a short cross, but it was filled with spirit. No fear, no fear. Fighting spirit charging into the heavens. Inwardly shocked, Xian Yunlan completely put away her other thoughts. Although she was bullied today, but every step that Zhongshou took was logical. Even if she was splashed with a bucket of water by this monster king, it was because she was the first to use the demon charm technique. Although it was revenge, the methods of the person opposite her could be said to be brilliant. Even someone as strong as Qingyin's school and Tsang Shengdao couldn't find anything wrong with him. She could only bear with her anger and bite her lips. Looking at the teasing expression in the teen's eyes, Xian Yunlan's chest was so depressed that she was about to spit out blood. He really wanted to go all out and fight to the death with Zhongshou. In the end, the heart state that she cultivated in the brothel slowly came into effect. Rationality slowly took over. Xian Yunlan bowed once more, her voice becoming soft. Ruler is joking. Although Qingyin school is seen as a demon sect, they aren't unreasonable. How can they be enemies with Gantian Mountain City because of such a small matter? However, now that ruler has vented your anger, can that surely Ling Xiangding ban be removed? Zhongshou was delighted when he heard that, retracting his fighting spirit, shaking his head slightly. That ban is a huge policy of our Gantian Mountain City and concerns the big picture. What does it have to do with the grievances between us? Those girls are considered people of Gantian Mountain City. I have my ways of dealing with them. It isn't something that you can care about. If you came for this matter, then stop talking and waste my time. At this moment, not only was Zhang Xian furious, but even Xian Yunlan's face was twitching. So this time, they had come for nothing? They suffered such humiliation, but in the end, they couldn't even get a single promise from him. Zhongshou originally wanted to just wave his sleeves and leave. He had plans for the Shirley Ling Xiangding matter. Naturally, he would leave a way out for those brothel girls and didn't need her to say anything. However, just as he stood up, he had an idea. Thinking back to the zither music he heard. Xian Yunlan, Qingyin School's zither skills. You guys know the soul calming spiritual tune to calm your souls to twos. Xian Yunlan was startled, slightly nodding her head. She didn't know why Zhongshou suddenly mentioned this matter. In the next moment, Zhongshou laughed out. So you are a direct disciple of the Qingyin school. Sorry for the disrespect. How about this? If you really want to save those pitiful people in Shirley Ling Xiangding, then play this tune for me for 2 hours every day for 3 months. What does Miss Yunlan think? Xian Yunlan was at a loss. Thinking about it for a moment, she nodded her head. The soul-calming spiritual tune was the secret technique of Qingyin school. Each time she played it, she would consume a portion of her soul power. However, if she could perfectly solve this matter, then she wouldn't care. Tsang Shengdao disciples were mostly born in a pitiful state. Their way of doing things was also a little stubborn. Only Qingyin school was different. Due to their cultivation method, they did things peacefully. Xian Yunlan pitted the girls of Shirley Ling Xiangding because of her background. If she could let these people have a way out, she was willing to pay any price and do anything. Zhongshou shook his head. Looking at the girl's expression, he suddenly felt ashamed. Did this girl really think she was the reincarnation of a saint? She didn't even bargain and just agreed. Moreover, he could see that Xian Yunlan was sincere. Compared to this girl, he was pretty much a scum. He felt ashamed of his own inferiority. Towards such people who thought they were pure and innocent, kind and compassionate, he hated them the most in his last life. It wasn't that he didn't like them, but that he felt that they were piercing. Like a living being that lived in the darkest shadows, instinctively afraid of sunlight. Laughing with unknown meaning, Zhongshou didn't say anything more. using his finger to beckon Xian Yunlan before walking out of the side hall. He still returned to the dojo. However, after Zhong Shou entered, he directly closed the doors. Shutting Xian Yunlan outside meant that he wanted her to play the zither outside. Within the Hanyan Palace, there were many musical instruments. Not long later, Chu Shui found a decent quality zither and placed it in front of Xian Yunlan. Then, she giggled as she sat at the side and watched. Xian Yunlan was furious and furious. Her heart was extremely bitter. How did she offend this demon? She took in tens of deep breaths before suppressing her emotions. Her hands pressed down on the zither, and the first note was played out. It was crisp and touching, following which a series of notes flowed like a stream, naturally flowing into the hearts of the people around. Chu Shui originally had thoughts of monitoring, but as the zither music continued, her eyes slowly went into a daze. She felt that in this world, there wasn't a sound as beautiful as this. Even the soul power ocean that hadn't moved in a long time was slowly expanding. This soul-calming spiritual tune actually had the effect of helping one cultivate soul power. However, the zither music didn't last for long. In that incomparably spacious martial arts training room, a cold sneer could be heard. Another line of people gathered in the air outside of the doors. Unpleasant to hear, impulsive. Is this the secret technique you have passed down? If it only has this little ability to mesmerize the mind, then it is really disappointing. Xian Yunlan was slightly startled. Her finger technique messed up and a thread of blood appeared on her fingertips from the zither strings. Following which she looked towards the direction of the door in shock and rage. She could allow this Zhong Shou to humiliate her, using the lives of close to 10,000 girls in Shirley Ling, Xiangding, to threaten her. However, she definitely wouldn't allow him to humiliate her sect. Just as she was about to retort, she heard that Zhong Shou formed a few more lines of words. I heard that the most important part of your soul, calming spiritual tune is the word silence. If your heart isn't calm, how can you play a truly nice zither music? You stayed in the quiet cloud pavilion to experience the affairs of the world and bathe in the mortal world. The Confucians have a good saying that when the heavens give a person a huge responsibility, they must first torture their heart, work their muscles and bones, starve their skin, empty their body, and mess up their actions. Hence, they must bear with it and do what they can't. What you have experienced today, who knows if it isn't a test from the heavens? If you can't even take this bit of anger, then why are you still training in martial arts and cultivating the path? At the start, Xian Yunlan was laughing coldly. She only agreed to play the soul-calming spiritual tune for 2 hours. As for the effects of her zither music, she didn't guarantee it. What obligation did she have to make her heart calm? The last few sentences were like a huge bell, so loud that even the deaf could hear it. It shook her soul such that huge waves rose up, her emotions unable to calm down for a long time. In her heart, she suddenly had an enlightened feeling. That's right. With her identity as a zither player, she came to this quiet cloud pavilion to experience everything in the world, to see the changes in the mortal world, the human heart. Then, what she experienced today wasn't a test for her heart realm, a training. Thinking about it carefully, this young monarch was actually no different from the guest who came and went in the quiet cloud pavilion in the past. Every day, weren't there people who were unhappy with her and wanted to make things difficult for her? There were even people with bad intentions. Then, why did she have to care so much? Thinking about it like that, Xian Yunlan's heart instantly calmed down. In an instant, she seemed to have comprehended a lot. Not only was she not angry, but a smile appeared at the corner of her lips. Her 10 fingers danced on the zither. A melody jumped out once more. As expected, it was totally different from before. The soul power that should have been consumed wasn't consumed. Instead, it increased slightly. Within her mind, there seemed to be many floating dust that was swept out, making it crystal clear. At this moment, Zhong Shou was behind the door. His mouth was wide open, unable to close. His nonsense was only meant to deceive the other party into playing the soul, calming spiritual tune for him willingly. This dumb woman actually believed him. Not only did she believe him, but she also started to seriously play the zither. Her soul realm seemed to have improved a lot because of his words. All of a sudden, Zhongsho didn't know whether he should regret or feel lucky. Anyways, this Xian Yunlan was indeed a rare weirdo. Squinting his eyes, Zhongsho was too lazy to bother. That illusionary heart mirror still floated in front of him. His mind once again entered a state of meditation. This soul-calming spiritual tune of Qingyin sect was really amazing. In terms of healing soul injuries, it was not inferior to some rare spirit pills. The faint pain in his head had already completely disappeared. After Zhongsho observed his soul ocean, he didn't bother anymore. Following which, he raised up the illusionary heart mirror. However, this time it wasn't to let his soul enter a peaceful, illusionary realm. Instead, it was a battlefield filled with killing intent, filled with corpses and bones. The first person that appeared in front of him was a strong enemy that he had met in his last life. The illusionary heart mirror was a grade 7 spiritual artifact, which was why it could only simulate grade 7 experts, ascended ancestors, and day wandering spirit masters. Zhongsho set his cultivation as the night wandering realm of spirit masters. However, he didn't have any true chi at all. Within the illusionary heart mirror, sword energy charged into the heavens and spiritual energy surged. What Zhongsho was using now were spiritual techniques. At most, he would use the one origin sword to help him to deal with the attacks of this day, wandering spirit master, to not let himself die too early. Although his martial path was strong, his greatest achievement in this life was in soul power. However, he had no experience in spiritual techniques at all, using illusionary realms to think about fighting methods. Although it didn't have the time acceleration effect of the illusionary mirror in his last life. However, it was the quickest way to make up for this weakness. Directly choosing the day wandering spirit master as his opponent was because Zhongsho believed that only under the pressure of a strong enemy could he grow faster. Chapter 272. Using the illusionary heart mirror to simulate, at the start, even with the help of the one energy sword, Zhongsho was defeated in just a breath. However, Zhongsho wasn't afraid of being killed. Originally, in the illusionary realm, his soul would be affected. However, at this moment, there was a silly girl playing the soul-calming spiritual tune outside of the room, so he didn't have to worry anymore. He just needed to go all out to use spells and talismans to block the suppression of this day wandering spirit master. In this illusionary realm, everything was formed based on the memories in Zhongsho's mind. In his last life, he had been through hundreds of battles and was knowledgeable. He knew the methods of spirit masters like the back of his hand. The day wandering spirit master simulated by the illusionary heart mirror was 80 to 90% real. He truly had the ability to move mountains and rivers. His methods were also unpredictable and not inflexible at all. He pretty much didn't use the same method twice to counter the enemy. Thousands of spells that Zhongsho knew were at his fingertips. From start to finish, he was torturing and killing Zhongsho. Actually, if it was martial path, even if he was only at Earth Chakra to Meridian Xiantian cultivation, Zhongsho was confident that he could use his martial path intent to last above 4 breaths. However, this illusionary realm was formed to train the fighting techniques of spirit masters. The methods that Zhongsho could use were limited to spirit masters. This caused him to not know what to do, not knowing what methods he should use to block it. An hour later, after hundreds of clashes, Zhongsho was finally able to block and break a spell, following which he was instantly destroyed by the spiritual energy that covered the entire area. However, the spells that he broke started to slowly increase. 2, 3, 4, until he occasionally entered the second breath period. Maybe because he was fighting under such high pressure, the spell fighting method that he slowly formed was a little different. Either he used his talisman path attainments to break the spell before it was formed, or he thought of a way to counter the spell. They were all extremely dangerous, using the weak to fight the strong. In the beginning, Zhongsho was still calculating the time. but after only a quarter of an hour, he could not help but completely forget everything. He completely forgot himself and only knew how to analyze and summarize. After a long time, Zhongsho gradually regained consciousness. Then, he was shocked to realize that he was able to frequently enter the sixth breath under the frenzied attacks of the day wandering spirit master. When he attacked, there seemed to be a kind of rhythm. It was incomparably compact and pleasing to the eye. Spells after spells were cast out from his hands. Not only were they much faster, but his understanding of talismans was also much better than before. That seemed to be an epiphany just now. When he thought about it carefully, it seemed to be the case. However, when he was fully focused on the battle, he did indeed feel an endless surge of inspiration. His thoughts were also several times faster than before. In this state, no matter what he learned, it would be incomparably fast. But if it wasn't an epiphany, then what was the reason? Could it be because of the illusionary heart mirror? Speaking of which, he used this mirror and used some tricks. It was an illusionary technique developed in the future that spirit masters used to target their own bodies. Through self-hypnosis, one's mind would be clear and one's thoughts would be clearer. This was also the most shallow use. Roughly 5,000 years later, there was a pervert. He continuously hypnotized himself to think that he was the one and only God's spirit in the world. In the end, this person actually became unbelievably strong. Not only did he create a sect, but he also stepped into the saint realm and was amazing for a period of time. Zhongsho didn't have such ability and also didn't have such close to perverted confidence. The bad thing about this method was that once one's confidence was broken and the hypnosis was broken, one's cultivation would be reduced by 90%. In the end, the sect leader who created the mind hypnosis technique fell just like that. Zhongsho wasn't willing to follow in his footsteps and end up in a tragedy. He only used some harmless and effective methods that were proven in the future. Through the illusionary heart mirror, the effects were a little stronger. However, even then, he wouldn't enter a state similar to an epiphany. Suddenly, a zither sound rang out in his ears. Zhongsho instantly opened his eyes like he understood something and looked towards the gate. He pretty much understood the reason. The illusionary heart mirror hypnosis was one reason, but Xian Yunlan's soul calming spiritual tune also had a huge effect. Moreover, this zither sound was already incomparable to when it started. A large-scale cleansing and sublimation. Each note was just right. It wasn't fast nor slow, not light nor heavy. Just this zither sound alone was enough to cause one to have no distracting thoughts, wanting to immerse one's mind in the zither sound forever. This was the true soul-calming spiritual tune. Legends had it that when one was at their peak, one could tame grade 9 beasts. Using his spiritual sense to slightly sense, he could feel that Xian Yunlan was fully focused. Her eyes were closed, her lips were smiling like being able to play this tune was really comfortable for her. Nearby, Chu Shui had already fallen asleep. As for the rest of the guards, they were all stupefied and incomparably quiet. Looking at the sunlight shining in from the window, it was already noon. It had obviously exceeded the 2 hours that they agreed on. Zhongsho's mouth was agape, thinking to himself that this was called luck. So the one who was enlightened wasn't him, but this dumb-looking woman. His words seemed to have totally awakened Xian Yunlan, causing her to break through some kind of barrier. However, the heavens took pity on him. At that time, he really didn't think too much, only thinking that it was best if he could trick her. If he couldn't, then it didn't matter. Sighing for a moment, Zhongsho tossed aside all distracting thoughts. Without hesitation, he lit up a few red sandalwood incense sticks and placed them in front of him. After that, he carefully took out a luck talisman and stuck it on his forehead. This chance was hard to come by. Even if he would suffer from bad luck in the next few hours, he would accept it. He raised the illusionary heart mirror up in the air and shone it above his head. His spiritual sense instantly entered a state of meditation. In his mind, there was only one purify word. He split it into tens of true talismans and thousands of spiritual patterns, continuously breaking it down, continuously fixing it, and continuously combining it back together. Over and over again, he constructed the word purify in his mind. Over and over again, he pushed it aside without leaving any traces, until this word was compatible with the path of heaven and earth, resonating with the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Who knows when, but little gold on Zhongsho's left arm actually gave out threads of heat. In front of Zhongsho, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth started to gather on its own. Over and over again, it was the purify word. They were all similar, but each change caused the 10,000 feet of heaven and earth spiritual energy to become a little purer. All the dust in the 1,000 feet wide cultivation room was pushed to the corner by an external force. It caused the ground that Zhongsho was sitting on to be unusually clean. These talismans were also used on Zhongsho's soul and body. If at this moment Zhongsho could look into his body, he would be able to sense that the true qi in his body was extremely pure. Within his soul ocean whirlpool, it was so clear that it was close to being transparent. Once he comprehended, Zhongsho totally forgot about the time, until the talisman in his mind repeated several times, but it didn't make any progress. Zhongsho's spiritual sense woke up once more. He knew that even if he continued, he wouldn't be able to make any progress. This was due to the accumulation of talisman knowledge and lack of knowledge. This is a true enlightenment. Within Samuraim's mind, threads of purple light flashed, revealing a surprised expression. I have already completed 60% of this true talisman. In the future, even if I slowly deduce it, I will only need half a year to fully comprehend it. If I can find records of this talisman to verify it, the time could be even shorter. After a spirit master's cultivation passed the stage where they improved by leaps and bounds at the start. Even some geniuses wouldn't be able to improve in 4 to 5 years. To be able to enter the next realm in half a year, Zhongsho was already really satisfied. This speed wasn't any weaker than those direct bloodline geniuses who had the help of sect resources. At this moment, his brain was still unusually active. Under the stimulation of the zither music and illusionary heart mirror, his inspiration continued to rise. Just as he wanted to continue to work hard and comprehend a little more on the King Path martial arts, his brows suddenly rose. His brows furrowed as he looked into the distance through the gate. Due to the zither music and illusionary heart mirror, Zhongsho's spiritual sense was also unusually sensitive. In that instance, he suddenly captured an intent filled with evil intent stabbing over from the distance. This is an ascended ancestor. Pretty much instantly, Zhongsho recognized the strength of this intent, as well as the killing intent within. His thoughts spun, and moments later, he roughly guessed where this person came from. Demon Mountain sect? Zhongsho sighed. This was really problematic. In this Gantian mountain city, in his own territory, he didn't fear ascended ancestors. Hu Qinxiu, who was an 8-meridian Xuanwu expert who was good at the martial path, as long as he was prepared and borrowed the strength of 400,000 troops, he could go up against ascended experts. If he could advance a grade, then 100,000 troops would be enough. That day, Qiu Wei and Hu Qinxiu had far fewer experts than Zhongsho, a difference of several times. However, they were able to have an advantage in the city because of this. As for himself, he could also borrow the strength of a country. Although his cultivation was only at the Xiantian's 2nd meridian, and there weren't many things that he could use, with his martial path cultivation, it wasn't a problem for him to keep his life in a head-on battle. However, the strength of an ascended ancestor was in his own body. If he wanted to be enemies with Gantian Mountain, he wouldn't be able to do much to him. Within these 2 to 3 years, he wouldn't be able to leave Gantian Mountain City. Moreover, this person was so careful, like he was waiting for something. He also vaguely felt that an even greater danger was quietly approaching. Apart from this person, there were probably other experts. Who knows, there might even be a grade 8 Grandmaster. A sharp glow flashed in Zhongsho's eyes. His heart was ice cold. However, even then, he didn't regret what he did in the Blood Valley Demon Corpse Mountain. Even if he knew that he would be taking revenge, that he would fall into a situation where he couldn't recover. That day, he would still attack without hesitation. Living in this world, there are things that one should do and things that one shouldn't do. At that time, if he still had to look on from the side, then what was the point of him living? Grandmaster Expert. If he couldn't win, he would just die. Chapter 273. With a thought, he summoned the one origin sword and let it float in front of him. Zhongsho once again started to think back to those secret books that recorded the Emperor martial path that he had seen in his last life. The 4 moves that Zhong Weiren seemed to have created weren't complete. Power also wasn't that strong. Previously, it was only because it was compatible with the indefinite Spirit Emperor art, so it could be used immediately. Only then did he change the fist technique to a sword technique. Actually, there were many flaws. Xue Moyan and Wu Ye weren't at the peak realm. Even if they saw the flaws, they weren't able to use them, which was why he was able to crush them and kill them. As for Zhong, it was because he caught him off guard. If they were to fight again, this person would be able to see through him, and at least he would be able to retreat. Even if he used King Path martial arts, in terms of strength, he could beat Zhong. It was the same. This is the book, Emperor Wind. Lines of words flowed in Yu Yu's mind. The Emperor Path cultivation method he chose only had 2 simple words, Emperor Wind. There weren't many Emperor Path secret techniques in the cloud world. In the central continent, there were tens of dynasties along with the 5 continents and 12 islands. There were only hundreds of kingdoms that had the ability to use King Path martial arts. Those that were perfectly preserved were even fewer. However, along with those from other worlds, there was an ocean amount. As for the book that Zhongsho chose, power wasn't strong, and his cultivation speed was only average. The only good thing about it was that it was calm and peaceful, and it had the least amount of true qi and soul corruption. After making his decision, Zhongsho didn't hesitate anymore, using the power of the zither music to enter that mysterious state. The thoughts in his mind were running at close to 10 times the usual speed. The one origin sword in front of him was also changing bit by bit, using the sword to replace the body, cultivating the king path. There were many parts of this cultivation method that needed to be reconsidered. However, at this moment, Zhongsho didn't ask for it to be perfect and flawless, without any flaws. As long as it was within a certain amount of time, it would be effective. This set of Emperor Wind was split into 13 layers. It should be the imperial martial Tao of a great empire in another world. Just the first 9 levels could correspond to the 9 levels below the immortal Tao. Zhongsho's one origin sword had a foundation, which was equivalent to the night wandering realm. The first and second levels were cultivated almost instantly. Only when he reached the 4th and 5th levels did he encounter some obstacles. 2 hours later, he was still successful. At this moment, there seemed to be a word condensing on the sword. Upon closer inspection, one could vaguely make out the word Wang. As soon as the character was formed, a huge pressure shrouded the entire cultivation room, covering an area of a few hundred jong. At first, he was unable to control it. It was like a Tyrannosaurus Rex, crushing everything in its path. The stone ground was crushed into pieces. Even the roof beams were shattered into pieces, causing dust to fall from the roof. When he reached the 6th floor, Zhongsho stopped decisively. The Emperor Martial Tao was different from mortal martial arts. Cultivation did not depend on one's aptitude, but on the power of the nation. If the cultivator was proficient in the force of martial Tao and had a strong national power, the national power would be at its peak. Then within 2 to 3 months, it was possible to cultivate to the peak of the 13th layer. A teen inheriting the throne could instantly become an emperor who had the ability to slaughter peak martial cultivators. In some big countries, 3 to 5-year-old kids who inherited the throne could grasp shocking strength under the effects of their bloodline. They didn't even need to cultivate. With the king energy gathered in Gantian Mountain City, Zhongsho had the confidence to directly step into the 7th layer within a month. Even if he had a few months, charging into the 8th layer was not a dream, which meant that in a month, he would be able to go up against that grade 7 Ascended Ancestor Day Wandering Spirit Master. Of course, he could only show off his strength in this small Gantian mountain city. The strength of a country. The king path energy was only thickest in the capital city or in places with dense spiritual veins. The further one was from the capital city, the thinner it would be, which was why the capital city of a country was a place where the dragon veins gathered. As long as one was the emperor, he wouldn't easily leave the capital and wouldn't go out of the country. The moment he left, no matter how strong he would be limited, like a dragon trapped in a shallow pond. After cultivating the 7th layer of this emperor wind, Zhongshou had the confidence to avoid this calamity. However, he wasn't in a rush now. He just needed to complete it before that ascended ancestor or even grandmaster came to find trouble with him. The most important thing now was to build a firm dam to block the corrosion of the king path energy. His brows locked tightly. Zhongshou thought seriously for a moment. Within the body of the one origin sword, he started to build runes once more. The first was lightning, hoping to use the power of lightning to lock it down. The second one was the incomplete purification, when a few true spiritual charms were just imprinted on it. Zhongshou felt an unusually strong power instantly crushing it. It was the strength of the country and also the king energy. Normal true spiritual talismans didn't have the ability to restrict it. It seems like the few government decrees yesterday caused the king path energy within the sword body to boil. It didn't grow, but became more condensed. Am I falling into a trap of my own making? How annoying. I really can't be a wise ruler. Frowning as he opened his eyes, Zhongshou looked around, only to see that outside the window, it was already deep into the night. Following which he exclaimed as he looked at the sword in front of him, which had an intense change in appearance. However, the trace of King's chi in his body suddenly started to shrink and go into hibernation, quieting down. The pressure that was gathered within the hall by his one origin sword suddenly started to dissipate, surprising Zhongshou. The other name of the king path energy was dragon energy. Dragons were majestic and proud, representing emperors. To be able to make it retract its claws and fangs and willingly submit, it was either the strength of the country falling or an expert recognized by heaven and earth descending. At the very least, it was far above the spiritual grandmaster or even the celestial path. Moreover, it seemed like they didn't have any bad intentions towards Gantian Mountain City and didn't hide it at all. An expert of that level just needed a thought to crush the dragon energy that was just formed in Gantian Mountain City. Thinking about it for a moment, Zhongshou's expression became weird. Could it be that my future backer has finally arrived? That Song Xingdao and the Kinzo sect finally had a victor? Damn, couldn't they have come earlier? After learning this Emperor Wind, it wouldn't be good for me to regret. All of a sudden, he wanted to beat his chest and stomp his feet. The influence of the Emperor Wind on the one origin sword was at the 5th layer. In the future, if he wanted to remove it, the price he had to pay would be 10 times that of before. The zither music continued. Zhongshou didn't have the heart to take advantage of it. He lowered his head dejectedly as he pushed open the door, only to see that Xian Yunlan still forgot about everything. However, her 2 jade-like hands were stained with blood. A jade person playing the zither. It was originally a beautiful and eye-catching scene. However, at this moment, Xian Yunlan's fingertips were covered in wounds. One could see the white bones within. It seemed like not only wasn't it beautiful, but it was also a little terrifying. Zhongshou curled his lips, using spells to gather spiritual energy to make a ball of ice-cold water and pour it on Xian Yunlan's head. As expected, the latter woke up and stared furiously at Zhongshou, only to see a few words form beside him. It's enough. Stop before going too far. Going too far is as bad as not going far enough. Xian Yunlan was originally filled with regret and unwillingness. A day of playing the zither caused the soul power in her body to multiply. Who knows, maybe tomorrow her cultivation would be able to break through to the peak of the return to Sun Realm. At this moment, she was slightly shocked. After thinking about it, she felt that the energy in her body was a little unstable. Her eyes were filled with respect as she bowed deeply towards Zhongshou. Yinlan thanks Ruler for your help. I'm really grateful for your guidance today. If Ruler didn't wake me up in time, I would have gone down the wrong path. Zhongshou blinked. It was tough to say that he used water to wake Xian Yunlan up out of jealousy. He waved his hand in a carefree manner, laughing involuntarily as he was about to walk out of the door. A sense of danger rose up in his heart at that moment. Then, in the next moment, a boom sound was heard. The martial arts training room collapsed with a loud bang. Zhongshou was unable to dodge at all. His head was first heavily smashed by the bricks, and then dust covered the sky. When the dust scattered all about, Zhongshou's body was covered in a gray-yellow color. Only 2 eyes were left on his face as he looked at the sky speechlessly. He wondered if the heavens could make him even more unlucky. Xian Yunlan in the distance had her mouth agape, thinking to herself that with Zhongshou's strength, he should have easily dodged it. Chushua, on the other hand, woke up with sleepy eyes. She looked around in a daze and yawned. This time, the entire house collapsed. Young master, you used that luck talisman again? At midnight, a teen dressed in a green, scholarly shirt stepped into Gantian Mountain City. Although the city gates were closed, it was unable to block the body of the teen. He directly treated it as an object, stepping onto the 500-foot city. Just as he reached the city walls, he saw Zhao Yinran waiting solemnly at the side. Seeing the teen arrive, she immediately bowed. Yinran greets the revered one. At this moment, if Zhongshou or Lei Dong was here, they would definitely be shocked. She must have been shocked. Zhao Yinran, who is usually frivolous and unrestrained, was actually acting like a lady from a big family. Her words and actions were all gentle and polite. The teen smiled, casually waving his hand and helping her up. You are Zhao Yinran? I know the personality of your Seven Spirits sect disciples. Be more casual. There is no need to be restrained. Although there were groups of soldiers patrolling, they were unable to notice the 2 of them who were talking. The teen looked at the entire Gantian Mountain City, his brows furrowing. How quiet. Is there a night curfew in this Gantian Mountain City? Zhao Yinran immediately nodded. 2 days after Zhongshou ascended to the throne, there was a night curfew. There were also a few government decrees, like all the brothels in the city were all closed down. However, Zhao Yinran doesn't know about country matters and doesn't know whether it is good or bad. After the teen heard that, he shook his head slightly. He didn't care about that. In his impression, a night curfew did more harm than good. Zhongshou ascended to the throne not long ago, so there might be other reasons. However, the dragon energy here is showing signs of rising. I probably scared it. He stepped down once more and arrived on the streets, only to see that the sides were really clean. The style of the buildings didn't look like that of a barbaric land, but similar to that of the central continent. Just as he was about to head directly to the peak, the teen's eyes were attracted by a line of words. Looking over, it was a notice board with a few pieces of animal skin written with words nailed to it. Chapter 274. Investigate that Shirley Ling Xiangding is immoral and immoral. Like Quiet Cloud Pavilion, men and women are all evil and promiscuous, announcing it in front of everyone. After a long time, there will be immoral and ruin the martial morals of Argantia Mountain. From today onwards, we will seal up Shirley Ling Xiangding, as well as all the brothels in Gantia Mountain City. From today onwards, there will be a curfew in Gantia Mountain City at night. The teen instantly smiled and knew that this was the reason for the curfew. Martial customs and morals? This reason was barely passable. Zhao Yanran, who was at the side, also paid attention, expressionlessly saying, Quiet Cloud Pavilion is the outer sect branch of the Qingyin Mountain sect. 2 days ago, Zhongshou was splashed with a bucket of cold water by the disciples of the Qingyin sect. So they're using their power to take revenge? Such a personality can't be used. However, it is really interesting. The young man in scholarly robes chuckled and glanced at the second decree. He had originally planned to take a cursory glance and leave, but in the next moment, he let out a cry of surprise and completely stopped where he was. All adult couples in Gantia Mountain City who can give birth after 3 children. Those who give birth to an extra child will be rewarded 1 grade 2 beast crystal. Those who give birth to an extra girl will be rewarded 8 grade 1 beast crystals. Those who give birth to more than 3 children. Those who don't have enough money to raise their children. You can apply to the City Lord Manor. After it is verified, the City Lord Manor can provide for you. Compared to 2 days ago, this decree had a large change. In some details, it was even more perfect. The teen's eyes shone, deep in thought. Who knows what he was thinking about? Zhao Yanran, who was at the side, was slightly shocked. Your revered one, is there something special about this decree? She didn't know much about politics and didn't take a close look at the decrees that came from Zhongshu. She didn't feel much about the benefits of having more people. She only knew that when there were more people, there would be more people in war. As for rewarding people for giving birth, it was indeed a first in Donglin Cloud Continent. However, according to what she knew, this revered one was once a famous border official in the Central Cloud Continent. He had also traveled in the flourishing lands of other worlds for many years and was very knowledgeable. It was truly surprising that such a character would be surprised by the decree of a demon king in a desolate land. This is indeed rare. Is it to strengthen the foundation of the race? Interesting. The young man in scholarly robes nodded. When he was still an official in the Central Continent, he was well aware of the ways of farming and warfare. However, this was the first time he had seen such a method of directly rewarding people with money to stimulate population growth, especially for the demon clan, whose population was gradually decreasing. It was more like a heart-strengthening pill. He had looked down on this Zhongshu previously, but he did not expect that this lad was actually quite capable in governing a country. Then, he looked at the third item. 3 days later, the library of the City Lord's mansion would be opened. The library was divided into 5 levels. All disciples of the Gantian Mountain Zone family can choose 5 books from the first layer before they reach adulthood. As for the other Gantian Mountain tribes and the human race, there were 4. The thousands of secret manuals in the second and third layers could be exchanged for with merit points. The eyes of the teen lit up once more. When the 4th and 5th entered his eyes, a red glow appeared on his face. Any Gantian Mountain citizens, as long as someone is a guarantor, they can borrow money from the City Lord's manor to purchase pills and weapons. All army disciples don't need a guarantor, interest-free. Specially set up a bank with the City Lord's manor as a guarantor. From today onwards, we will collect retirement and disability funds so that our Gantian Mountain people won't have to worry about being old, disabled, sick, and weak. All Gantian Mountain people can participate, loaning money to raise soldiers, bank to retire. So this is a political matter. It can actually be done like that. The teen only looked at half of it before he used his spiritual energy to pull the few worthless beast skins in front of his eyes. Like a treasure, he held in his hand and looked at it carefully. In his eyes, the crude and simple words seemed to have an endless aftertaste. He pondered over each sentence and thought about it. A red spiritual pattern slowly appeared at the center of his brows. After a long while, he gave out a self-mocking laugh and kept the beast skin into his sleeves. I can't see any flaws. This is really an eye-opener. If one hears the Tao in the morning, one can die in the evening. This Zhongshu, I really underestimated his ability to govern a country. There were only a few strategies, but they were imposing and majestic. If the 3 saints hadn't deduced that the Divine Emperor 100 years in the future was a human, they wouldn't have known. I almost thought that this kid was the real godly emperor seed. Zhao Yanran could not help but raise her eyebrows. She did not expect that this revered one would have such a high evaluation of Zhongshu. However, when he thought about Zhongshu's narrow-mindedness towards Tranquil Cloud Pavilion and how he used his power to avenge private wrongs, he disapproved of this. However, no matter how arrogant she was, she didn't dare to refute this Tsang Xingdao. Not to mention his identity and cultivation, just his seniority alone was much higher than hers. Speaking of which, in the eyes of the revered one, this Zhongshu is a wise ruler, allowing the old to rely on him and the young to be raised. How is he not a wise ruler? If he was born in the Central Dynasty and was able to do these things, then it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he would be an eternal saint. Scoffing coldly, the The Confucian-dressed teen corrected her with a straight face. Then, he regretfully shook his head. Unfortunately, this method is only suitable for this Gantian mountain city. The Central Dynasty has a huge population, officials are corrupt, and have too many people. No matter how good the decree is, it won't be effective there. It would even torture the people to death. Following which, he looked curiously at the sixth beast's skin, a weird expression appearing in his eyes. The only one he didn't understand was this one. Setting up an elder hall to monitor the flow of money? This is also a good plan. However, this commotion seems a little too big. I feel that something isn't right. It seems like this Zhong Shou has other intentions. His brows jumped. He could feel that this plan had something to do with him and even Song Xingdao. It concerned luck. However, thinking about it carefully, he had no idea. The Confucian-dressed teen could only shake his head, solemnly placing these few beast skins into his sleeves. Raising his head and looking up, the teen suddenly smiled. This is the soul, calming spiritual tune of the Qingyin sect? This little girl is really lucky to enter a state of enlightenment. That Zhong Shou is also really lucky. No, he is really unlucky. Although he couldn't understand the true meaning of Zhong Shou's sixth decree, he was looking forward to meeting the new monster king of Gantian Mountain. The first thing he did after walking out of the ruins was to take a good bath. After his body was clean, he asked someone to call Rimbo over in the middle of the night. This Rimbo was also skilled in the martial path. However, due to him dealing with administrative matters, he didn't have much time to cultivate. This person's foundations weren't bad. However, he only reached the martial ancestor realm when he was 40. When he went up the mountain, his face was filled with exhaustion. Looking at Zhong Shou, his eyes were filled with a fierce glow. From morning to night, he didn't even sleep for 4 hours. Naturally, he was annoyed at this kid who disturbed his sleep. Even if he was the monster king of a city, his ruler, he was still annoyed. It wasn't that Zhong Shou didn't feel that he wasn't nice at all. However, that Xian Yunlan had been staring from the side and wasn't willing to go down the mountain. She was even kneeling outside his room. She looked like if he didn't agree to give that Shirley Ling Xiangding girl a way out, she wouldn't stop. He was forced to do so. However, after meeting, Rimbo kept his emotions, solemnly persuading, I heard that ruler hasn't dealt with administrative matters for 2 consecutive days. I feel really pained. Ruler focusing on the martial path is a good thing. However, ruler needs to remember that the 10 cities of Gantian Mountain, 80 million people, are all tied to you and can't be careless. Zhong Shou laughed awkwardly and waved his hand. Another line of words was typed out. I have my own plans for this matter. Let's talk about it after a few days. It won't affect administrative matters. Just as he was hesitating about how to open his mouth. If he said it openly, and other people found out that Xian Yunlan had come up to persuade him, then, if he changed his mind that night, how bad would his reputation be? Following which Rumbo's brows relaxed as he said, Since ruler said that, then you should know that a king's words are worth a lot of weight. There's also one more thing. Shirley Ling Xiangding has been sealed up. However, the 100,000 women inside need a way to survive. Zhong Shou was delighted when he heard that. He really wanted to sleep, and a pillow was sent over. His expression didn't change. I have thought about this matter. Why not choose a place outside of Gantian Mountain City to build a citadel? Those merchants can also move over. Citadel? Rimbo looked at the words formed in the void and muttered to himself. Then, he nodded. The monarch is benevolent. This method seems good. Allow this old subject to return and think about the pros and cons before replying to the monarch. Zhong Shou wasn't surprised. If Rimbo agreed right away, he would be disappointed instead. In his heart, he was thinking about buying land in advance to build houses and collect rent. Zhong Shou smiled in satisfaction. There's also the Cloud Ocean Hunt. Prime Minister needs to prepare for it. Inform the races that it would be best if we could set off within a month. Rimbo's brows rose up. He had been waiting for this matter for a long time. This was a huge matter in Gantian Mountain. If there wasn't such a reason, then it was still okay to call him over in the middle of the night. He instantly bowed. Ruler, Those 250 cloud ships, along with the resources and war machines, I have already prepared them. We can set off at any time. Zhong Shou held his breath, thinking that during this month, unless his backer came to find him, he wouldn't dare to run out. Following which he casually changed the topic. Oh, right. Prime Minister, I want to copy the Central Continent Emperor dynasty and build a 6-ministry cabinet system. In a few days, send a name list to me. You have to recommend people who are capable. Rimbo was startled before he calmed down. Building 6 ministries was a good thing. The official system of Gantian Mountain City was a mess. However, this cabinet probably wanted to split his power. Since it was a cabinet, naturally there would be many ministers as expected. A new ruler would have new ministers. This ruler's methods were the same as before, righteous. Rimbo, would accept it. However, why did he need him to recommend? That's right, he was definitely testing whether or not he was ambitious and wanted to take power. I'll just do my best. Chapter 275. Looking on as Rinbo left the warm room, Zhong Shou was in deep thought, thinking about the warning Rinbo gave before he left. The Cloud Ocean hunt concerned the income of Gantian Mountain as well as the number of experts they could recruit. Powers like Yunxia Mountain, Blazing Flame Mountain, and Taoyuan City definitely wouldn't give up on this chance to suppress Gantian Mountain. As for that Taigang Hall, unless Zhong Shou paid for it, the treasury wouldn't have money to fix it. Then he stared at the pile of bee skins in front of him in a daze, his gaze unfocused. He said that he didn't want to bother, but he knew. There were some memorials here that he had to deal with as soon as possible. Being the Monster King was tiring. He could only hope that a few months later he would be able to deal with everything and leave. The bead curtains behind shook, and Xian Yunlan walked out. Then she bowed towards Zhong Shou gratefully. Thank you, ruler. Yunlan is really grateful. I will keep my promise to the 3-month agreement. Zhong Shou waved his hand dispiritedly, too lazy to bother. He just opened up a document. Just as he was about to read it, he heard a clear, heart-stirring laugh spread into the room. In the middle of the night, you still don't forget to deal with administrative matters. You are actually so hardworking. Why do you have to set a month later to hunt in the Cloud Ocean? Don't you know that there are strong enemies outside of Gantian Mountain? Zhong Shaoxin's heart thumped, thinking to himself that he finally came. Xian Yunlan didn't have time to leave. Her eyes opened wide as she looked out of the window in shock. In the next moment, she saw a male step into the room from the main door. The guards at the side were like statues, not reacting at all. Chu Shui and Ruo Shui, who were standing behind Zhong Shou, were first shocked. Only when they saw Zhao Yinran behind that person did they calm down. Xian Yunlan was totally confused. She recognized this girl. She was from the same sect as her. But what was the identity of this guy? We have no choice. Gantian Mountain's finances have dried up. The arrow on the bow has to be released. And it's precisely because we know that's why we have to lure him out. Zhong Shou pondered for a moment, then put down the pen in his hand. Then he stood in front of the writing desk and bowed like a junior. He still spoke with words. Senior, how should I address you? He didn't dare to be disrespectful. For this person to be able to make Gantian Mountain's dragon energy go into hibernation, he was far from just celestial realm. That was a realm that he hadn't reached in his last life. The man in scholarly robes unceremoniously sat down on a nearby chair. With a flick of his sleeve, he helped Zhong Shou's body up and said, "You are the ruler of a country. No need to be so courteous. As for myself, I am the Lord of Tsang Xingdao. As for how to address me, it is really difficult." Samuraim's eyes narrowed as a look of surprise appeared in his eyes. He thought that the person who came this time might be the head of the Wujua Manor, Yin Fan, or that Tai Yuan sect leader. Or perhaps it was the elders of these two sections. However, he didn't expect that the person who came would be the revered head of Tsang Xingdao. He heard that this person was a Saint Realm expert long before the God Emperor era. When martial cultivators and spirit masters stepped into the celestial path, they were Spirit Realm, Celestial Realm, God Realm, Saint Realm, End Realm, and True Realm. End Realm, True Realm, Legend had it that there were only 3 to 5 people in the world. They were the true peak of the worlds and were rarely seen, be it the cloud, desolate era 10,000 years ago or in the various worlds. Saint Realm experts were already invincible. However, based on what he knew, this person should have left this world long ago to roam the void. Such an expert would be suppressed if he came to the cloud world before the spiritual wave rose. His ability would at least drop by 99%. As long as there were enough grade 9 experts, they could even take his life. This was why, be it martial cultivators or spirit masters, once they entered the celestial path, they would go all out to leave this world. Did this person take the risk to return to the cloud world because of his matter? Should he be proud of himself? The young man in scholarly robes hesitated for a moment before coming to a decision. My name is Wei Su. You can call me Senior Brother Wei from now on. This time, not only was Zhao Yanran stunned, Xin Yunlan, who was next to her, was also stupefied. When she heard that this young man was their revered one, she almost lost her composure. At this moment, when he heard this, he lost the ability to think. Her heart was in turmoil, but Xin Yunlan's expression was still okay. On the other hand, Zhao Yanran had a dejected look on her face. She was extremely conflicted. In the past, he had thought that it would be his junior brother. Zhongshou also let out an ah as he stared blankly at the man in front of him. He thought to himself, does this mean that I can already be on the same level as this character from 8,000 years ago? However, no matter how bold he was, in front of such a person, he still didn't dare to casually say the words senior brother out of his mouth. He couldn't act dumb either. He could only gather his spirit to form words. How can Zhongshou do I have? I really don't dare. You don't dare and not aren't willing, which means that you don't mind joining my Cang Xingdao. Wei Su smiled, his eyes filled with satisfaction. With your talent, if you were placed in Taishan sect, it would only delay you. I originally wanted to personally take you in as a disciple, but if I snatch you away, those girls in Taiyuan sect would definitely blame me for being unfair. Even my few senior brothers would blame me, which is why I decided to take you in as a disciple on behalf of my master's wife, who had already immortalized. You can still be considered part of Taiyuan sect. I remember that master's wife always had a wish for me to find a disciple to take over her legacy. Zhongshou was originally really happy and was prepared to say that it was a surprise. However, when he heard that his master had already immortalized, he couldn't help but feel bitter. The so-called immortalized was just a nicer way of putting it. In truth, she had already passed away. Didn't that mean that he still had no one to protect him? A child without a mother was like grass. A child without a master was the same. He didn't pay attention to the words behind. Anyways, it wasn't important. However, when Wei Su's words landed, he saw a silent and colorless spiritual energy flow charge into his throat. Then, Zhongshou was delighted and knew that he could open his mouth to speak. As expected from a Saint Realm expert, without making a sound, he was able to heal his vocal cords. During these few days, the bone in his throat didn't show signs of softening and recovering. It made him think that it would take several months to a year for it to recover. At this moment, one of his worries had been solved. Without much hesitation, Zhongshou bowed. Zhongshou is willing to follow your orders. He knew that since Wei Su had already decided, then he didn't have much room to reject. Why not be more direct? He was curious in his heart. With the sword path one, with the spirit that he showed, it was more likely that he was from the Kinzo sect. Who knows what kind of deal the two sects had between them. Following which, Wei Su seemed to have a telepathic connection with him, nodding his head and saying, I will accept this bow on behalf of Senior Master. In the future, there is no need for this. Zhongshou, you comprehended sword intent at 14, using your own strength to break through the barriers from heaven. I saw that your talent and personality is better than mine in the past, which was why I brought you under Senior Master. However, Junior Brother, you can't be arrogant because of this. Do you know why the head of the Kinzo sect gave up on you? It was because a top talent appeared in the Central Continent. At 19 years old, both spiritual and martial path entered the peak of the Xuanwu return to Sun Realm. His sword path might not be as good as yours, but he was able to merge spirit and martial arts, one man and one sword to kill a giant lightning serpent, which was why the head of the Kinzo sect exchanged with me. I helped him obtain such a good talent, but the Kinzo sect had to give you to me, Song Sheng Dao. Zhongshou instantly sucked in a deep cold breath. Although he was unhappy with what the Kinzo sect did, no one liked to be abandoned. Just 19 years old, and merging spirit and martial arts made him totally convinced. He had no choice but to be convinced. This was a true genius amongst geniuses. It was said that people who dual cultivated spirit and martial arts, the earlier they merged spirit and martial arts, the more chances they had to charge for the Saint Realm. In his last life, he didn't reach that realm, which was why he didn't know if it was true or not. However, since there were such rumors and the sects placed so much importance on it, it was most probably true. Chu Shui scoffed, wanted to say something but stopped. What was 19 years old merging spirit and martial arts? Our young master wasn't even 14, and he had already done it. Wei Su and Zhongshou's expression dimmed, knowing that the blow just now was a little too big. He shook his head. You don't have to care so much. I have high hopes for you. You can't do it now, but that doesn't mean you can't do it in the future. You are blessed by the heavens with talent and comprehension, so why envy others? Wei Su, wasn't as good as you in the past. However, in the Saint Realm, there aren't many who can beat me. He smiled and asked, although you're my senior master's disciple, he isn't here anymore. I also have to leave the cloud world and can only return in a few decades. I have to find someone else to teach you. Junior brother, are you willing to leave with me now? Zhongshou instantly hesitated, wanting to immediately leave and continue to pursue the pinnacle of the sword path. However, no matter what, he couldn't do something like burning the bridge after crossing it. Thinking about it for a moment, Zhongshou asked carefully, can senior brother give me a few more months? Let me deal with the matters of this mountain city. When Wei Su heard that, he looked right at Zhongshou until he felt goosebumps all over his body. Only then did he sigh regretfully. I wanted to test if junior brother could let go of everything here. As expected, Zhongshuxin's heart jumped slightly, thinking that Wei Su misunderstood. If he didn't inherit someone else's body, he would have abandoned this Gantian mountain city like a pair of worn-out shoes. Just as he was thinking that things weren't good, thinking that he missed out on something and didn't know how to explain. However, he heard Wei Su's tone change. Forget it. Originally, I wanted to directly bring you away. I don't care about the foundations of Gantian Mountain. However, when I entered the city, I found out that your governing ability isn't weaker than that of a saint ruler. If you don't cultivate Emperor Path secret techniques, it would be a waste. You use your second soul and the sword to replace your body. This method is not bad. Later, I will give you something as a gift for joining the sect. Shortly after, Wei Su smiled. I have too many enemies in the cloud world and can't waste too much time in your Gantian mountain city. Before I leave, I will help you deal with those small fries. Junior brother, you won't have any worries. Rise. With a wave of his sleeves, a wind blew within the warm room. In just a moment, Zhongshou was nowhere to be seen in the room. Chapter 276. Slightly distracted, Zhongshou noticed that he was in a totally different place. Looking around carefully, only to see that he was in an endless wilderness. There were large patches of golden wheat all around. Beside him was a huge river. It should be a long distance away from Gantian Mountain City. He couldn't even see the outline of the city. Beside him was empty. That senior brother Wei was nowhere to be seen. He couldn't sense any aura at all. Who knows where he was at this moment? Teleporting 1,000 miles? Saint Realm expert, what a good move. Samuraim's eyes constricted before he shook his head and laughed bitterly. He exclaimed to himself, who knows when he would be able to reach such a realm? However, where exactly was this place? Using the one origin sword in his soul to slightly sense. He only felt that the King Path 7 gathered within had decreased by 30%, showing signs of exhaustion. Speaking of which, I should still be within Gantian Mountain, roughly 200 miles away from Gantian City. Looking out at the stars above, Zhongsho was startled in just half a breath. Isn't this place where the ascended ancestor that I sensed before was hiding? So that was the case. Pretty much instantly, Zhongsho understood. He was probably used as bait by that Gantian path, revered one. He couldn't help but rub his temples, feeling a headache. He was really helpless. He knew that at this moment, even if he wanted to return to Gantian Mountain City, he had no way to do so. Zhongsho decided to just walk along the shore, leisurely looking at the night scenery. Although there was a huge enemy beside him, his expression was really relaxed. As expected, in just a moment, he felt a strong intent spread over. That person obviously didn't expect that Zhongsho would appear here and was a little suspicious. Then, he stood at the side and carefully observed for a moment. He didn't hide anymore, pretty much silently appearing beside the shore. He was less than 100 steps away from Zhongsho. Judging from his voice, he should be in his 30s. However, his entire body was shrouded in black mist, making it impossible to see his appearance. He only revealed a pair of eyes, looking over coldly with a questioning intent. "You are Gantian Mountain City, Lord Zhongsho? Why are you here in the middle of the night?" Zhongsho Shin was suddenly at a loss. This was really difficult to answer. At the same time, he felt pity for the person in front of him. "Would you believe me if I told you that I was casually tossed here by someone to wander around as bait to lure someone out?" The black mist figure let out a cold laugh, its eyes filled with cold mockery. Zhongsho knew that the other party was doubtful. He was originally unwilling to waste his breath on this person, but for some unknown reason, Wei Su hadn't made an appearance until now. Left with no choice, he could only think of ways to say more to stall for time. Could it be that he had been betrayed by this revered Song Xingdao, borrow someone else's blade to destroy him? Speaking of which, he had only kowtowed once, and could not be considered to have truly entered the sect, following which he felt that it wasn't right. With such a method, why would they need to go through so much trouble to deal with him? Sighing slightly, Zhongsho could only press down on the 9-Shilin sword, turning around and saying, "Coming here in the middle of the night is naturally to kill someone. Who are you, and why are you spying on me here?" The dragon energy within the One Origin sword instantly exploded out. An aura that was only weaker than this ascended ancestor was formed. A sword aura that seemed to be able to contain mountains and rivers suddenly gathered around Zhongsho's body. The surrounding 100 meters of land suddenly caved in. A sharp light suddenly flashed in the eyes of the black fog figure. The fog that shrouded his body also started to boil. King Path's secret technique. Mountain River Sword Intent. Very good, as expected from the son of Zhong Weiran. No wonder you dare to come here alone. Hee. The rumors within Gantian Mountain City were just a cover. I knew that how could the person who wiped out all the powers of Gantian Mountain be trash? It seems like my 2 junior brothers and Olmi died in your hands. That's right. Zhongsho's lips curled up, continuing to think of a way to delay time. Speaking of which, you are from Demon Mountain Sect? I heard that roughly 20 years ago, your sect was wiped out by the 7 large sects of the Central Continent. Till date, Tailing Sect is still searching for your sect and is looking for you. In terms of courage, you should be the ones. You just rose up from the ashes and actually dared to run out. A fierce glow flashed in the eyes of the black mist figure. He wanted to attack, but he still hesitated. Looking around, his spiritual sense was like a wave sweeping all around, until he confirmed that within 100 miles, even a grade 9 spiritual grandmaster and true image realm expert couldn't escape his detection. Only then did he laugh coldly. "So what if I am? Do you think that you can leave this place alive?" He only took one step forward. A tyrannical and unpredictable aura with some treacherous and uncertain aura suddenly surged. Zhongsho was able to accept the mountains and rivers, but this person was able to roam freely within the mountains and rivers. He was able to strip away the aura and pressure that Zhongsho gathered bit by bit, even using it for his own use. When he took a second step, even the king energy within Zhongsho's One Origin sword was suppressed until it was shrunk into a ball. The black mist figure had been paying close attention to Zhong Shou. Seeing that there wasn't any fear or panic in his eyes, he was deep in thought. He couldn't help but feel slightly disappointed and also didn't understand. Was there really an expert beside him? His voice was still solemn and serious, filled with mockery. What a waste. You are so young and have great talent. Unfortunately, you are too arrogant. Do you really think that just because you grasped a bit of the mountain river sword intent and the strength of a country, you can go up against ascended experts? You really don't know the difference between heaven and earth. Zhong Shou suddenly came back to his senses from his deep thought. This should be the swift sword intent, but it is slightly different. No, it should be called the demon sunflower sword intent. Are you going to die without any descendants? The face of the black mist figure instantly twisted, but his heart didn't waver. He still slowly walked forwards like he was casually taking a stroll as he slowly got closer. He scoffed coldly. You only care about your mouth. Originally, I wanted to wait for Master to capture that Xian Mountain City father and daughter before I attacked you. However, since you ran out yourself, it saved my sect a lot of effort. Before his words landed, Zhong Shou's eyes instantly constricted, his mind slightly distracted. He thought that this Demon Mountain sect would take revenge on him, and also thought that this Demon Mountain sect would definitely stop at nothing. However, he didn't expect that they didn't find him, but went to find Irin and Xianyuan Tong, who on the surface seemed to be the strongest. He remembered that 2 days ago, Ruo Shui had reported to him that Xianyuan Tong had already entered the Ascended Ancestor realm. Borrowing the strength of a city, he should be fine for now. However, in his chest, there was still rage, vengeful energy surging. In the last life, Zhong Shou lived alone. This was why he did whatever he wanted without any worry. He also didn't care about his own life and death. Only now did he feel that he was different from before. It was because he already had someone he cared about in this matter. Thinking about that, Zhong Shou's mind was filled with killing intent. The black hair at the back of his head floated up as he forcefully broke free from his hair crown. The end was slowly turning ashen white. Little bits of death energy started to gather. If Wei Su didn't attack, then in this battle today, only the last few moves of the Styx River Death Sword, the self-harming technique, could fight for victory with this ascended expert. That black mist person was delighted. His expression didn't change, as he was already dozens of feet away from Zhong Shou. As expected, this Zhong Shou was shaken by his words. So what if there was an ambush in this place today? Dozens of feet away, he didn't need a breath to take down this kid. The demon's sunflower sword was so quick that even a spiritual grandmaster couldn't react to it. A hard-to-see black sword shadow silently pierced out from the black mist. It was extremely swift, just a flash, and it was in front of Zhong Shou. However, before it could stab into Zhong Shou's body, he heard a low bow sound. The black mist person only felt that the sword in his hand had stabbed into an iron wall. If that was the case, then he didn't need to care. It was just a defensive spell. He didn't care about it, and it was expected. No matter what it was, he was confident that he could break it with one sword. In the next instance, he felt a giant strength no weaker than his charge back at him. It caused that sharp black sword to instantly bend. Then, he was forcefully rebounded away without any strength to resist. Looking forward, he saw that Zhong Shou's expression was still dark and cold. Behind him stood a scholarly dressed teen who was smiling gently and elegantly. You finally came? It really wasn't easy. He looked at Zhong Shou, his tone filled with praise. Your acting is not bad. The righteousness of today's matter is on my side. Since this fellow has acted, even if those few old demons of the demon sect appear, they won't be able to protect this demon mountain sect. However, it is best if you don't use this sword art that uses the death energy. He lightly patted the side of Zhong Shou's shoulder, and the death energy instantly dissipated. Zhong Shou's gaze also regained its clarity. The figure in the black fog staggered and retreated 100 steps before coming to a stop. He was first at a loss. Then, he felt the scholarly dressed teen's gaze look over coldly. You dare to attack the direct disciple of my Tsang Xingdao? How bold! The moment he said that, the entire night sky turned white. The moon was no longer there. In the sky, the bright moon was no longer there. Instead, a bright sun hung high in the sky, emitting a scorching light. The black mist person took just one look, and he was instantly astonished. Just now, it was still the middle of the night. It couldn't have turned to noon in an instant. He had only seen such methods in some books left from the cloud desolate era. Normally, people who could have such abilities would have already entered the celestial path, and their realms would be high. The person in front of him was actually above the celestial path. It is heaven-changing, illusionary earth. Almost without thinking, the black fog figure tried to escape. But then, he heard a chuckle, and a boundless force suddenly enveloped him. It caused his body to stop on the spot. Chapter 277. Almost without thinking, the black fog silhouette wanted to escape. But then, he heard a chuckle, and a boundless force suddenly enveloped him. It caused his body to stop on the spot. Since you know it is a heaven and earth-changing method, where do you think you can go? Along with those words, the black fog person only felt a weird power being born out of nowhere. The blazing sun in the sky seemed to be burning up. The threads of sunlight turned hot and burned the black mist around him. At the start, this person wanted to resist, but in just a moment, he gave out a heart-piercing roar. The black mist was completely torn apart. A thin person in a green shirt was revealed. His face was green and white, with cross scars intersecting on it. His originally ugly facial features were split into pieces, making him look even uglier. As expected, it is the broken demon sunflower sword. It has already reached the 7th grade. Just as despair appeared on the green shirt person's face, Wei Su released the energy that wrapped around him. Don't worry, I won't bully the weak. What is your name? Zhong Shouxin had just calmed down. When he heard those words, he couldn't help but roll his eyes. He didn't understand what this Zhang Shengdao, revered one, meant. With Zhang Shengdao's demon sect methods, he actually talked about morals and not bullying the weak. That itself was really weird. The green shirt person obviously didn't believe it, carefully looking at Wei Su with fear in his heart. A moment later, he knew that he had no way to reject, so he opened his mouth. Demon Mountain sect disciple, Kuei Chi. Kuei Chi? Then is there still Kuei Ba, Kuei Jiao? Wei Su smiled when he heard that. The sun in the sky also instantly retracted, causing the heat in the area to lessen. His eyes shone with a teasing glow. I will give you a chance. Today I won't attack, but if you can escape from my junior brother's sword to 100 miles away, then I can let you go. Naturally, my junior brother's life is precious, and I won't allow you to hurt him. Zhong Shou was at a loss. Even the last few sentences didn't make his mood much better. Was this a joke? Although the person in front of him was an initial Meridian Empyrean, he wasn't someone he could deal with. Even if he were to use the night roaming realm, the 5th layer of the Emperor's Wind, or the 4 sword moves, it would still be impossible. Within the cloud world, be it martial cultivators, spirit masters, beasts, or ghosts, the difference between grade 6 and grade 7 was like the difference between heaven and earth. Before his cultivation reached return to Sun or Xuanwu ancestor, he had no right to challenge this ascended ancestor. Letting him fight with this person, wasn't it obvious that he was letting the other party escape? All of a sudden, Zhong Shou understood something. This Wei Su seemed to be gentle and decent, like a pure and honest gentleman. In fact, at the bottom of it all, he was probably a lunatic like Zhao Yanran, who acted as he pleased and was unrestrained. In any case, apart from soft notes and the others who had entered Zhang Shengdao, the rest of them were probably abnormal. Having said that, cultivating in a brothel itself was very strange. Kuei Chi was also a little confused, suspiciously looking towards Zhong Shou. Him? I don't believe. In his heart, he was even more shocked. Why would this expert, who was at least above the celestial realm, call this kid who was at most a 2 Meridian Xiantian Master Junior brother? Could it be that this kid was the reincarnation of a fallen powerhouse? That's him. Wei Su nodded his head, once again patting Zhong Shou's shoulder. Although my Zhang Shengdao reputation isn't good, it isn't much worse than your demon sect. However, have you heard that there's been a time when our common people path disciples didn't keep to their words? If you don't believe me, I can make a heart oath that today I won't add a single finger to your body. Seeing a glimmer of hope appear in Kuei-chi's eyes, Wei Su smiled, the corner of his lips unusually cold. Naturally, if you want to escape, it won't be so easy. Have you heard of using someone else's strength to intimidate others? I will allow him to borrow my strength. Hearing the words intimidating others, Zhongshou and Kuei-chi's brows jumped. The latter was first shocked, following which he scoffed. He didn't say anything, directly turning around and fleeing. Although he was worried that this Zhongshou was the reincarnation of a fallen expert. However, he could feel that the two of them didn't cultivate the same cultivation method. Their martial path intents were totally different. No matter how strong he was, if he couldn't attack him, what did he have to fear? As for that Gantian mountain prince, no matter if he was a reincarnated expert or a top talent, with his little bit of cultivation, he didn't place him in his eyes. With this mysterious Song Shangdao expert protecting him, he knew that he couldn't do anything to this Zhongshou. Naturally, it was best for him to leave as soon as possible, not willing to stay for even a moment longer. That person was looking down on him, Kuei-chi. Zhongshou's head hurt. He didn't bother about the person who had already fled, entering deep thought. The so-called intimidating others and borrowing strength, as the name suggested, was to borrow the strength of others for one's own use. Merging other people's martial path intents, even true chi and spiritual energy to use to attack the enemy. However, it was different from gathering the strength of a country in an army. A country with billions of people, their thoughts were really messy. As a ruler, one didn't need to bother. One just needed to grasp the thoughts of the people towards the ruler and country. One didn't ask for purity or cleanliness. One only asked for strength and strength. To crush everything. And this was borrowing the strength of others, intimidating others. However, the key was in one word, same tone, be it cultivation methods or martial path intents. One needed a foundation to be able to borrow it. If it wasn't pure or clean, then what was the point of forcefully borrowing it? This was one of the principles behind the formations of the sections. His hand pressing on the sword by his waist, Zhongshou wanted to pull it out several times, but he pressed it down once more. The rage in his chest was still burning crazily. Since this Demon Mountain sect wanted to scheme against Iran, then how could he allow this person to escape in front of his eyes? However, this borrowing strength was different from that king path martial art. Wei Su, who was beside him, was like a sun hanging in the sky. It was blazing hot, yet it was perfect. If he fought with others, Wei Su didn't need to attack. As long as he stood at the side, he would be able to cause huge pressure on the opponent and become his strength. However, it was only the same as heaven, earth, man, weather, wind, geography, etc. If it was just that, it was far from enough for him to go up against ascended ancestor experts, much less kill them. Is it the great sun knife intent? Using his mind to sense the void, he could feel that the sun in the sky was a crescent knife that was circling around. It turned into the shape of the sun. Wei Su obviously wanted to give him pointers and didn't stop him from visualizing this thing. However, this was a martial path intent that he had never comprehended before. Although he had come into contact with it, he had no way to learn from it and study it deeply. Who knows if it was because his sword path accumulations in the last life was deep enough, or because the sword intent was too strong, or because the luck word God talisman was still working. Zhongshou's consciousness entered that mysterious realm just as the sword attack was about to come out. There was no self in his mind. Only a great sun existed alone. As for Kuei-chi, he had already fled 30 miles away. The remaining 70 miles, with his cultivation, if he traveled at full speed, it would only take him tens of breaths. He instantly laughed coldly. I, Kuei-chi, have won today's agreement. Please keep your promise. My Demon Mountain sect and your sect's grievances. Kuei-chi will report it to the few demon venerables to deal with it. His voice was filled with endless mocking intent. When his voice landed, His entire body seemed to have turned into a ball of green light. His movement speed suddenly increased by close to 10 times. Wei Su was originally expressionless, but when he saw the situation, he exclaimed, "So you learned the Kuei spirit movement technique 2 grades earlier. No wonder you have so much confidence." Not good. This time I really overestimated myself. Just as Zhongshou was having such a thought, numerous consciousnesses surged like a river, observing and comprehending the great sun illusion in his heart. At this moment, he was interrupted by the voices of the two of them, following which he opened his eyes in annoyance. In the next moment, he realized that this wasn't the time to comprehend the martial path. Little Gold's body once again sunk into the 9 Qilin sword. The soul power in his body started to boil and surge, bit by bit charging into the sword. Zhongshou himself was thinking back to what he had obtained just now. Great Sun sword intent, body as the great sun, shining light all over the ocean. That golden 9 Qilin sword, before Zhongshoxin had a thought, had already jumped up into the air. At this moment, the sun above his head also seemed to have split into 2. Only the one that split out was not only faint, but its size had also shrunk by a lot. However, there was still a bit of sunlight shining on the 9 Qilin sword. Zhongshou's aura also merged with the blazing sun in the sky at that moment. Zhongshou was totally focused, not noticing anything at all. When he opened his eyes, there seemed to be a ball of sun in his eyes. The light was eye-catching. In front of him, he was pretty much unable to see Kuei Chi's body. However, Zhongshou didn't care, as long as he could still lock onto him. His hand once again grabbed the sword handle. Killing intent rose up. Zhongshou's entire body seemed to have turned into a streak of light, shooting 50 miles out. He was actually comparable to that green shadow, several times faster. The so-called Great Sun was a light source, and this light was the fastest thing in the world. In just a moment, he had already chased behind Kuei Chi. How is that possible? You don't cultivate the Mountain River sword intent? Mountain River Great Sun, they are totally different, 2 different paths. How can there be someone like you in this world? Along with those words, Zhongshou's soul could even sense the disbelief and cold killing intent that rose up in Kuei Chi's heart. Then, in the next moment, countless sword shadows came from behind him. Many sharp sword shadows cut through the air, giving out a series of chi-chi sounds. Kuei Chi fled decisively, and when he counterattacked, he didn't hesitate at all, extremely sharp. Zhongshou was too lazy to bother. Pretty much all his soul sense gathered on one point. His sword only needed that point. 47 miles kill. The golden sword light suddenly turned and accelerated, piercing into the heavy sword shadows without any hesitation. It treated the tens of millions of sword shadows as nothing. Then, the sword energy that was like light and silk flowed within. In the next moment, threads of blood spurted out. A person was sliced into thousands of pieces in the air. Zhongshou suddenly retracted his sword back into the sheath, turning his head to look at Wei Su. The Confucian robed teen looked over with a weird expression. Chapter 278. Wei Su didn't feel embarrassed at all, only carefully sizing up Zhongshou, a bright glow flashing in his eyes. This borrowing of power actually worked. From before to now, only 20 breaths had passed. In just 20 breaths, Zhongshou had comprehended his great sun martial path from having no foundations to the intent level. 100 miles, not even half. This speed was simply terrifying. His sword path was truly one with the spirit. It wasn't fake. No, it wasn't just that. This wasn't a simple borrowing and imitation, but merging his great sun blade intent into his own martial path. What kind of talent did he find for his sect this time? Although he wasn't as good as a dual cultivator, he might be able to reach the peak of both in the future. The path of cultivation was like a long-distance race. No matter how fast one ran at the front, if one dropped the chain halfway or didn't have enough stamina, one would still lose in the end. Zhongshou scoffed coldly. After a long while, the violent intent in his eyes faded. Senior brother, don't you think you have to give me an explanation? In his heart, he roughly guessed that this was a test from Wei Su, a test, or rather, an inspection of the goods. However, since he was unhappy, then he should say it out loud and let him know. If not, this fellow might even offend him even more. Explain what? Wouldn't it be better to personally kill the enemy? Wei Su wasn't annoyed. Instead, he was filled with praise. Smiling as he walked closer, he took a look at the pieces of corpses that had fallen to the ground, only to see that before the pieces of flesh and blood reached the bottom, they suddenly started to burn. His weird expression became even thicker. Just now, I just wanted to tell Junior Brother about the way we song, Shengdao, disciples do things. In our path, we pay attention to the word solitude and the word freedom. Solitude is to come and go alone, to be independent. Freedom is to do whatever you want, to be free and do whatever you want. In the future, if you want to rely on the strength of the sect, senior and junior brothers, you will be disappointed. You can't rely on others. At most, after you are killed, we, the Tsang Shengdao, will kill your enemy and die without any regrets. Zhongsho was startled. He thought of the Seven Spirits sect and the Qingyin school. The disciples of these sects did not seem to be like what Wei Su had described. Whenever they encounter a problem, wouldn't they still call on their friends and form groups in order to gain strength in numbers? He knew that the Kinzo sect was much stronger than Tsang Shengdao. It's just Tsang Shengdao. It has nothing to do with the 3 sects and 6 schools. As if he had seen through Zhongsho's thoughts, Wei Su shook his head and explained, including you, there are only 7 people in my sect. Actually, me helping this time is already an exception. Junior brother, you have to owe me a favor. Zhongsho was first shocked, following which he came back to his senses, saying furiously, owing you a favor? Isn't this the problem that you all caused for me? If it wasn't for you, Tsang Shengdao, stopping me, Zhongsho, I would have joined Tailing sect, even that Wuju Villa. What can this Demon Mountain sect do to me? Wei Su held his breath and knew that he couldn't fool him. He laughed out loud. Then we don't owe anyone anything. However, today, if it wasn't for this, I wouldn't have known that Junior Brother had such ambition. You want to merge hundreds of sword paths for your own use. Samurai's eyes instantly constricted. However, he wasn't surprised. His Sword Path Heart Sutra used the One Origin Sword as the foundation, going straight to the roots of the martial path. The Styx Death Sword Intent, Mountain River Sword Intent, Great Sun Sword Intent, even the Cloud Shocking God Destroying Sword Intent. These were just external appearances. The source was still that one origin sword. The path of a sword path changed, but didn't deviate from its roots. As long as one grasped the foundations, one could form all things. One sword could display the hundreds of sword paths. One could also use the hundreds of swords to train oneself and build up the foundations. In a last life, he improved his martial path like that. Today, he created the world-shocking spiritual art with such thinking as the foundations. Wei Su was a Saint Realm expert, and it wasn't weird for him to be able to see the foundations of his sword path. However, what his senior brother saw was only the portion that he wanted him to see. The rage in his heart still hadn't dissipated. Just as he was about to speak, Wei Su's tone changed. Hearing what this person said, it seems like things aren't good at Xian Mountain City. Junior brother doesn't want to make a trip to Xian Mountain City? Do you want to walk east, or do you want me to teleport you there? Zhongsho blinked his eyes, instantly his anger dissipating. Such a huge weakness was still in the hands of the opponent. He couldn't do anything about it. Gantian Mountain was 2,000 miles away from Xian Mountain City. Apart from Wei Su's teleportation technique, if he wanted to rush over, it would take a few days. Junior brother isn't angry anymore? That's a good kid. Today I'll be kind and bring you over. Wei Su smiled expressionlessly, reaching out with his hand. A talisman hung in front of him. Balls of spiritual light seeped out from the talisman. The space here suddenly started to twist and change. Zhongsho was confident. Just one look, and he knew that Wei Su didn't use the power of the talisman to teleport. He was suppressing the fluctuations caused by the space changes. With Wei Su's cultivation level, concealing his aura in this world was several times more difficult than traversing space and time. Suddenly thinking about something, Zhongshou asked curiously, "Senior brother, does our Tsang Shengdao really talk about trust? We never go back on our words?" Thinking that if that was the case, then the future Tsang Shengdao wouldn't care about their descendants. Not to mention the 3 sects and 6 schools. Even the Tsang Shengdao, main sect that was on the verge of collapse, was pretty much infamous. In the future, he would definitely be the main culprit for ruining the reputation of the sect. Of course, that is a golden reputation. Wei Su laughed when he heard that, revealing a gleeful expression. Those who have seen us go back on our words are pretty much all dead. Our Tsang Shengdao naturally won't bully others. For example, that Kuei Qi, I said he wouldn't even add a finger. However, there's so many disciples in 7 Spirits sect who are all under me. Letting them attack isn't considered going against the oath. Zhongshou instantly exclaimed, instantly understanding what he meant. It was also at this moment that a gust of wind rose around him. Then, the scenery around him changed once again. The place where it appeared should be near Xian Mountain City, just 30 miles away. Zhongshou exclaimed at this celestial realm expert's precise grasp of space. At the same time, he frowned as he looked at the outline of the city. This huge city was unusually silent and suppressive. Similar to a few days ago in Gantian Mountain City, it gave off an extremely tense atmosphere. On the mountain peak, there seems to be a battle. When Zhongshou heard that, he immediately looked into the distance. As expected, on the mountain peak, balls of energy and spiritual energy fluctuations were spreading out in all directions. Before he was able to take a close look, Wei Su grabbed his shoulder. "With your cultivation, you probably can't shine 1,000 miles. Let's go. I'll bring you up to take a look." He actually stepped out and arrived at the peak of Xian Mountain, only to see that the mountain peak was in a mess. Those giant crossbows were all destroyed. However, there weren't any soldiers here, so naturally, there were no casualties. There were only 10 over people standing beside the Taigang Hall. Their cultivations weren't weak. Xianyuan Tong was like a mountain, his face ashen as he stood in the middle of the drill field. In front of him, a black-robed old man was floating in the air. He was roughly 60 to 70 years old, looking confident. His eyes were filled with a teasing expression as he looked down with caution. When the two of them arrived, Xianyuan Tong struck out with a mace. At the peak of the mountain, energy rippled like thunder, causing the entire Xian Mountain to shake. Then, there was a light kung as the mace wind struck. A black sword was forcefully pushed aside by that huge strength. However, it only flew back 30 feet before it stopped in the air. Like that strike that could crush tens of Xuanwu ancestors wasn't enough to reach the apex. As for the old man, he said calmly, "This is your Xianyuan family's 18 techniques of Xian Mountain. It is similar to our Demon Mountain sect. However, it is just that and not worth mentioning. In your eyes, maybe that is the case." Xianyuan Tong's eyes were half open and half closed. At this moment, he didn't waver. "However, at least at the peak of Xian Mountain, in this city, you can't do anything to me. Evil demon, you actually dare to come out and cause trouble. I think your death date is not far away." "Evil demon? Hee. Then what is your wife?" "In terms of evil, I am far from her." The black-robed old man laughed involuntarily. The sharpness in his eyes didn't reduce. "Today I have indeed underestimated you. However, although I can't do anything to you, that doesn't mean I can't do anything to your Xian Mountain City. If you really force me into a corner, I can do anything. I advise the city lord to surrender and hand over your daughter to me. I won't harm her life. I just want to go to Gantian Mountain to do something." Xianyuan Tong's eyes opened wide in rage, scoffing coldly. Just as he was about to speak, he heard Xianyuan Iren exclaim in surprise, "Zhongshou." The two of them were startled, turning their heads and looking out, only to see beside the cliff not far away, one tall, one short, similarly thin, 2 people. They were instantly shocked, not knowing when the two of them had arrived. When they saw that it was indeed Zhongshou, Xin Yuan Tong heaved a sigh of relief. The black-robed old man's expression was dark and sunken. Zhongshou looked at Wei Su with his eyes wide open. Seeing that he didn't have any intention to attack, he sighed. So I still have to rely on myself? Wei Su didn't reply, but gave him a praising look. One could roughly see that it was, "Junior brother, you are smart. You can be taught." Zhongshou really wanted to slap him. It was okay if he was an ascended ancestor, but this grandmaster, even if he borrowed the strength of a Saint Realm expert, he had a 100% chance of losing. He had no chance of winning. However, he didn't hesitate. Zhongshou pulled out his sword and walked forwards. "Uncle, can you give this battle to me? This is a problem that I, Zhongshou, brought by myself, so I should deal with it myself." Xin Yuan Tong originally wanted to reject, but a moment later, he felt that Zhongshou's aura suddenly became hot and intense. It was slightly weaker than his, but more pure. That gaze was also really firm. He was first shocked. Then he looked towards Wei Su, who he didn't know how strong he was. Thinking about it for a moment, he nodded his head. "Okay, but we need to drink some wine first." Chapter 279. First shocked, Xin Yuan Tong looked thoughtfully at Wei Su, who he didn't know the depth of. Thinking about it for a moment, he nodded his head. "Okay, but we need to drink some wine first." Zhongshou was startled. The hidden problems of his world's shocking spiritual art still hadn't been solved. He would get drunk just by drinking a little wine. It wasn't like Xin Yuan Tong didn't know that. At this moment, the enemy was in front of them and the battle was about to start. So how could he drink wine? Did he want to get him drunk and then send him away to act out a scene of him sacrificing himself for his children? Not only Zhongshou, but even the Xian Mountain City experts in front of Taigang Hall had their mouths agape when they heard that. Today, Zhongshou appearing here, his aura was no weaker than Xin Yuan Tong's, which already shocked them. They remembered that 3 days ago, they were shocked by the shocking battle results of this Gantian Mountain ruler, the future city lord of Xian Mountain City. However, when they found out that many of them were unfounded rumors, they didn't care, treating them as rumors or fake news with other intentions. However, at this moment, they personally witnessed the prince slowly walking over from the side of the cliff. Those rumors that they thought were preposterous floated up one by one. This aura, he's at the Ascended Realm? How is that possible? Didn't he kill several grade 6 beasts before he was 10 years old? Before entering Linhai College, he forced back the Een Flood Dragon of the Evil Spirit Moat. Was that true? Why did City Lord Xian Yuan order the young city lord to drink? Even Wei Su was startled, unable to make head or tail of it. However, a moment later, he smiled and didn't say anything to stop him. He just looked at the scene in front of him with interest. Only the black-shirt old man floating in the air had a dark and sunken expression. To drink in front of him, to think that Xin Yuan Tong could think of that. He really treated him as if he didn't exist, scoffing coldly. The black-shirt old man didn't immediately attack. Instead, he looked at Wei Su curiously. He didn't care about Xin Yuan Tong. That Zhongshou, although his aura was unexpected and not weaker than an ascended ancestor, he didn't place him in his eyes. This person left Gantian Mountain, the place where King Energy gathered, and ran over here. That was exactly what he wanted. Only this young man dressed in scholarly robes who was standing on the sidelines watching made him somewhat unable to see through his depth. He even felt a sense of alarm in his heart. Looking carefully, he couldn't see anything special about this person. However, a golden talisman floated beside him, emitting a dark aura. However, he couldn't sense anything with his soul sense. The old man immediately came to a realization. He guessed that the two of them had borrowed the power of this talisman. Hiding from his spiritual sense, he arrived at the peak of the mountain without making a sound or a trace. Although his abilities were not weak, he might not necessarily be stronger than him. He was a martial honorable, one of the most powerful people in the world. Even if there was a stage 9 spiritual Grandmaster Day wandering Spirit Master here, he was confident that he could escape unscathed. If the situation wasn't good, he could easily escape. Calming himself down, the old man didn't bother about Wei Su. His gaze turned dark and cold as he looked down on Xianyuan Tong and Zhong Shou. Zhong Shou was speechless. Just as he was about to open his mouth to speak, Xianyuan Tong didn't allow him to argue, saying loudly, "Irin, bring me some wine, the one you brewed 2 days ago." Xianyuan Irin hesitated. In her heart, she didn't want Zhong Shou to take the risk. Until Xianyuan Tong looked over did she exclaim, smiling sweetly towards Zhong Shou. She took out a bottle of wine from her heaven and earth bag and tossed it towards Xianyuan Tong. Out of the 10 over people beside, apart from Lisina and Zhu Junho, they were all really calm. The other people all exchanged glances with one another. One could see the shock in each other's eyes. It was still the same question as before. Why did he want Zhong Shou to drink wine before fighting? The old man in the black shirt was originally furious. At this moment, he calmed down, mocking coldly, Forget it. I'll wait and see what tricks you Xianyuan Tong are playing." He stopped in midair, standing with his hands behind his back. Beside him, a black long sword was dancing around his body. When it broke the wind, there was no sound at all. On the sword body, it could absorb light like it was one with the night sky. Wei Su didn't understand. He could only bear with it. When he heard that, he suddenly smiled. "This wine smell is not bad. Can this little girl give me a bottle?" Xianyuan Irin's brows furrowed. This time she didn't hesitate, casually taking out a bottle from her heaven and earth bag. Tossing it over, a look of embarrassment flashed across her face. "Junior just learned how to brew wine. Please don't laugh at me." Although she didn't know where this person came from, she knew that he wasn't ordinary. She also knew what Zhong Shou's true cultivation was like. He definitely wouldn't be able to enter the Ascended Realm in a night. It was also impossible that he used a red swift bird to send her a message yesterday. Today at dawn, he crossed 2,000 miles to rush to Xian Mountain. This young Confucian was probably not weak. Who knows, he might be Zhong Shou's future teacher. Wei Su took the wine in his hand, first placing it in front of his nose to smell it. It was indeed the same type as the one in Xianyuan Tong's hand. He opened the bottle cap and drank it in one gulp, savoring the taste. Then, his entire face scrunched up. He thought to himself that this was probably a beginner's skill. He said loudly, "Good wine. Although it can't be compared to those good wines, it has some talent." Seeing Xianyuan Irin's face turn red, Wei Su was more and more confused. Apart from putting in more treasures, there wasn't anything special about it. The person who brewed it was obviously good at medicine, but he was too careless and too confident. He placed in tens of rare treasures from the cloud world. In the end, brewing wine was different from refining pills, causing this wine to be totally useless. Apart from being extremely pure and having some body-strengthening effects, it had no other use. All in all, it couldn't make one's combat strength explode and raise several realms. Thinking about it for a moment, Wei Su smiled towards Zhong Shou, who was still unwilling. "Why not junior brother drink a mouthful? I also want to see what City Lord Xianyuan is planning. With me here, what are you afraid of?" Zhong Shou's brows were originally tightly furrowed, extremely helpless. He was already planning to not bother about Xianyuan Tong and directly attack. When he heard that, he could only bitterly accept the bottle of wine. His heart relaxed slightly. Since Wei Su had already spoken, then today's matter and even the safety of Xian Mountain, this Tsang Shengdao, revered one, was prepared to take care of it. Then whether or not he was drunk didn't matter. Maybe it would be better if he was drunk. Raising his head and gulping down a mouthful of wine, Zhong Shou's face instantly twisted. This was really good wine. His senior brother Wei was really hypocritical. In his last life till now, he had never drunk such a disgusting thing. Just as he was about to take a sip to complete his task, Xianyuan Tong said with a straight face, "If you're still a man and still want to marry my daughter, then drink it all in one mouthful." Zhong Shou's lips twitched. He could only swallow it in large mouthfuls. Luckily, it was only the size of a fist, and he finished it in a few mouthfuls. After drinking it, he casually tossed the bottle aside, praising loudly, "As expected, it is a good wine. Although it is useless this time, one can see that this wine recipe was carefully prepared. Smart, really talented." At the corner of his eyes, he saw Xianyuan Irin smile, revealing a happy expression. However, in the next instance, Zhongsho didn't bother about it. After drinking the medicine, it was like there was a ball of fire in his chest, unknowingly burning. Although he was prepared, isolating his true chi from the wine in his stomach, he was unable to prevent the drunkenness from seeping into his brain. Suddenly burping, Zhongsho's consciousness slowly became intoxicated. The person in front of him suddenly split into two, then two into one. Only a bit of consciousness was left, knowing that there was still a huge enemy in front of him, and an intense battle was about to begin. His hands pressed tightly onto the two swords at his waist. Although he lost his mind, Little Gold automatically snuck into the 9-Qilin sword sheath. Wei Su, who was behind him, was completely stunned. Drunk, this Zhongsho was actually drunk. A bottle of wine that wasn't even celestial grade. How could he get drunk? Moments later, Wei Su comprehended something. When they first met, he had checked out the situation within Zhongsho's body. He knew that Zhongsho's world's shocking spiritual arts circulation method. This kid's imagination was wild, to actually merge two spiritual veins into his body. That cultivation method was something no one had thought of. His future was limitless. The reason why he got drunk should be because of the water and fire vein spiral, causing a flaw, following which more questions rose in his heart. Looking at how Xianyuan Tong wasn't surprised, it was obvious that he knew about this matter. However, why did this person have to make his son-in-law drunk? Why didn't Xianyuan Irin, who Zhao Yanran said that Zhongsho and Xianyuan Irin stop him? In that instance, he nearly thought that Xianyuan Tong didn't want Zhongsho to interfere in the battle, which was why he did that. However, in the next instance, he saw the Xian Mountain City Lord laugh out loud, patting Zhongsho's shoulder. Then he walked to the side. The Xian Mountain City experts present all exchanged glances with one another. They all thought to themselves, how did this Zhongsho get drunk? Did Xianyuan Tong do something to the wine, purposely using the hands of the black-shirt old man to destroy his son-in-law? Just as they were all shocked, the black-shirt old man scoffed coldly. The show is over? Then go and die. A black sword light suddenly flashed in the air. However, it didn't come from beside the old man, but directly appeared 100 feet behind Zhongsho, following which it turned into an invisible streak of light and struck Zhongsho's brain. Xianyuan Irin had been paying attention to Zhongsho's situation, instinctively exclaiming, her jade-like hands clenching tightly. The pupils of the surrounding people constricted. They all guessed that Zhongsho definitely wouldn't be the opponent of this Grandmaster. However, they didn't expect this black-shirt old man to be so despicable. The outcome of the battle was decided so quickly. Just as everyone thought that Zhongsho was going to lose, Zhongsho smiled, only to see a lightning glow explode as Zhongsho pulled out the lightning winged sword. His arm, along with the sword body, turned into a swift shadow as he struck back. It knocked on the spine of the black-colored flying sword. Kung! A crisp golden ring sounded out. Zhongsho stood on the spot perfectly fine, while that flying sword was tossed tens of feet away. Chapter 280. Blocking with a sword, Zhongsho looked up in a daze. His eyes were filled with a weird expression. Burp! Why did you use your sword to stab me? I didn't offend you. The surrounding people were just shocked by Zhongsho's reaction and sword speed. When they heard what he said, their hearts jumped, thinking that this young city lord was drunk and muddle-headed. As for that black-shirt old man, apart from being shocked, he laughed out in anger. Two black-colored sword shadows, one in front and one behind, pierced over once more. Since his hidden sword-killing technique was seen through, he didn't bother to hide anymore. The sharp sword swiftly slashed out, bringing with it a sharp whistle. When it pierced through the air, it brought with it a gust of wind, causing the green stone paved ground to be lifted up. Zhongsho blinked his eyes. Pretty much instinctively, the long sword in his hand lightly tapped out, coincidentally hitting the tip of the black-colored sword shadow. Just as he was about to tap out and force it back, he felt a binding force strike over. The black-colored flying sword actually circled around his sword body, directly slicing towards his wrist. Hee, this sword-driving technique is a little interesting. Samurai's eyes instantly lit up. He didn't panic until the sharp sword wind was already close to his wrist. The sword in his hand suddenly shook up and down like a spiritual snake. The bouncing strength directly caused the black-colored sword's shadow to fly away, following which it knocked once more, striking on the other black-colored long sword. Immediately, there was another sharp clang. The moment they clashed, the second black sword was like the first one, trying to circle upwards. However, before it was able to wrap around, a spiral energy exploded out, and it was forcefully sent flying. All of a sudden, dust and sand flew up, and a 1,000-feet-deep hole was carved out on the green stone ground, pretty much casually forcing aside the two swords. Zongsho's consciousness suddenly comprehended something, suddenly grabbing onto something, following which his eyes shone brightly. "Oh, I understand. You are from Demon Mountain Sect. I killed a few of you. No wonder you wanted to sneak attack me. You should. You should. That Kuei-chi from before was the same. In the end, I killed him." Just as the black-clothed old man's eyes were about to pop out of their sockets, Zongsho's aura changed abruptly as well. It was as sharp as a sword, peerless and unparalleled. It was filled with an indescribable sense of ruthlessness. Zongsho's eyes were also filled with rage, a vengeful aura appearing. "However, it's fine for you to make a move against me, but you had to have designs on my urine." The methods of the MO family were just like that. It's just that this anger is hard to quell. "I can't beat you, but I must beat you up before I'm satisfied." As the word "gone" fell, the 9 sword at Zongsho's waist was already unsheathed. Shockingly, 9 silhouettes could be vaguely seen, and in an instant, boundless flames were released. Without any fancy moves, he directly slashed his sword towards the black-robed old man. Weisu grunted and raised his eyebrows slightly. He felt as if much of his soul power had been borrowed in this instant. You can borrow whenever you want, and you can actually restrain yourself even more. This ability is really not ordinary. It wasn't easy to borrow strength in the martial path, but to borrow soul power was even more difficult. The only way was to borrow the help of cultivation methods and spiritual formations. That 9 sword also used the Great Sun Sword intent. The distance of 100 million miles was just an instant. Just as Wei Su exclaimed, the black-robed old man raised his head. The 9 sword had already turned into a light and slashed down. The old man's eyes constricted, and then a sword shadow shot out from his sleeves like a venomous snake spitting out its tongue. It was as thin as 2 fingers, and it clashed with the 9 sword right away. The people below instantly only saw a series of thunder explode. Even the sound of weapons clashing was completely drowned out. 10 over Xuanwu ancestors, even if they stood here, it was extremely firm and had natural energy. In front of the Taigang Hall that suppressed all true qi and spiritual energy, they still found it tough to take. As for the black-robed old man, although he still stood in the air, 500 feet below, a 1,000-feet wide hole was formed in the ground. There was also a 200-foot deep hole. Only then did they notice that the two of them looked really calm, like they were just casually exchanging blows. However, it was Li Power. He gathered all his true qi and spiritual energy to the extreme and didn't leak out. This was why he didn't show off his strength, Broken Demon Sunflower Sword. So, here's another one with no balls. When did your Demon Mountain sect become the Demon Sunflower sect? Zongsho laughed out loud, mocking in his mind. He held the lightning-winged sword in his hand and stepped in the air. Lysina below couldn't help but burst out into laughter. She was from the demon sect and knew about the situation within. 10,000 years ago, the Demon Sunflower sect was a top sect that wasn't weaker than Tailing. Later on, they were weak and the sect was scattered. A portion of their sect-protecting book, the Demon Sunflower Sword Technique, was obtained by the Demon Mountain sect. At the start, it was still okay, but later on, 70% of the Demon Mountain sect disciples cultivated the broken Demon Sunflower Sword. They were mocked by the sect world and many cultivators for a long time. Suddenly, the bad feeling she had for her son-in-law decreased by a lot. However, in the next moment, her face was devoid of blood. However, Zhongsho's speed was getting faster and faster. He didn't care about his life, as he directly charged towards the black-robed old man. The old man laughed coldly, the two black-colored sword shadows in the air directly slashing over. The two-finger soft sword in his hand also slashed out. Before this, it was weird and quick, but now the sword attack was sluggish, like there was a giant mountain pressing down on the sword body. Easily, he forcefully smacked away the 9-Qilin sword that slashed over once more. Then, she exclaimed. When Zhongsho's body reached 400 feet, he seemed to have disappeared in the air, leaving only an image on the spot. In his spiritual sense, he felt a sharp energy pass through the black-colored sword veil at a speed that exceeded one's imagination, heading right for him. Pretty much without hesitation, the old man retracted his original sword intent. That two-finger sword once again became weird and quick as before. At this moment, he couldn't see Zhongsho's body, directly stabbing out with all his strength in that general direction. If you want to kill me, then you have to die first. As expected, before the light even arrived, it was forced to turn around. The sword energy changed once more, sweeping down from the air. The black-robed old man didn't even think, stabbing back with his sword. This time, it was a close to coincidental collision, following which an energy explosion sounded out. Countless fragments of sword power and blade wind swept in all directions. Everywhere it passed, as long as it came into contact with a physical object, it would instantly collapse. The originally squarish and neat mountain peak was instantly covered in sword marks. Zhongsho was only forced back a little before the sword wind struck over once more. That grade 4 lightning-winged sword was pretty much pushed to its limit. The lightning-winged yang snake bee soul within the sword also appeared outside of the sword. The swords of the two people were pretty much equally quick, equally sharp, and tough to block. In the blink of an eye, they had clashed more than 100 times in the void. Even the 9-Qilin sword was clashing with the two black-colored sword images nonstop. The sound of weapons clashing was like pearls landing on a jade plate, continuous and unending. However, the sound was ear-piercing and scary. It seemed like people like Xianyuan Irin, whose cultivation wasn't enough, had already retreated into Taigang Hall. Zhongsho's body that appeared in everyone's eyes was still on the spot. His entire body slowly became eye-catching, like a ball of blazing sun hanging in the air. The sword that stabbed out seemed like it was shooting out light, continuous and endless. Huge lightning bolts poured down from the air. Wrapping around Zhongsho's body, it also strengthened the lightning-winged yang snake to the extreme, twisting and moving about on the sword body. It pretty much recovered to the peak of this grade 4B soul when it was alive. Using the lightning power to push, the sword speed was pushed by another 30%. The people around didn't feel anything, but the black-shirt old man's pupils had already constricted into a needle shape. It was with much difficulty that he got used to Zhongsho's speed and rhythm. Who knew that he could push it up a grade? At this moment, he had the skills of his life, but he didn't have the time to use them. He couldn't even think about them. Only that broken demon's sunflower sword was going all out to make the sword speed faster, a little faster. Wei Su adjusted the already crooked Confucian crown on his head, deep in thought as he muttered, "Maniac lightning sword intent, great sun sword intent." Two types of sword intents merged into one. No wonder he had the confidence to create his own sword art and merge many schools of thought into one. If second senior brother were to find out about this, he would definitely be ashamed. What did he do it that year? I don't remember. Anyways, it was after the Ascended Realm. Who knows if that Kenzo sect leader would be so furious that he would jump up. As they say, a bird in the hand is better than a flock of birds in the forest. Master, I am, as you said, smart and decisive. However, although this person isn't a sword cultivator, his sword techniques are really amazing. With Zhongsho's body, it actually hasn't collapsed till now. Is it because of that spiral energy? To think that he could think of such a miraculous technique to break the barriers from heaven. Oh, 3 more breaths, at most 3 more breaths, and he will reach his limit. If not, this kid's body will collapse. That sword energy intersecting, pretty much sweeping across and flattening the peak of Xian Mountain. Just the energy that spread out was enough to flatten 100 feet of the mountain peak. At the start, Xian Yuantong was still able to suppress and protect, but in just tens of breaths he was helpless and retreated to the Taigang Hall, only protecting this stone hall. Only when the sword light slashed down and was about to tear apart this huge Xian mountain did he attack, punching out and shattering it. Even so, the entire 10,000 feet tall Xian mountain continued to tremble. Numerous sand rolled down. It caused the Xian mountain city below to panic. In the next instance, the blazing sun that Zhongsho's body had turned into finally shattered. A 2-finger flexible sword spat out sword energy, like it had expanded by 1,000 times, smashing that sun into pieces. Zhongsho's body was also sent flying out 2,000 feet. The clothes on his body were mostly shredded. There were also a few deep sword wounds where one could see bone. The black-shirt old man waved his sleeves in disdain, dissipating the blood in front of him. The faces of the people behind Xian Yuantong all turned ashen white. They knew that Zhongsho had finally lost. Wei Su shook his head and was prepared to attack. However, in the next instance, they heard Zhongsho scoff like a maniac. "You thing without balls, you really made me furious this time." Chapter 281. You ball-less thing, you really made me furious this time. The moment he said this, green veins popped out on the forehead of the black-shirt old man. The killing intent in his eyes nearly turned into a physical form. However, just as he was about to pull out his sword and kill this Zhongsho on the spot, his face turned solemn. The disdain on his face slowly faded. He was actually unable to wave out the 2-finger sword in his hand. Wei Su's expression also changed. The energy that had surged to the tip of his finger suddenly retracted. He exclaimed as he looked up into the sky once more, only to see that around Zhongsho's body, several sharp energies spurted out along with a blood mist. He actually used his own strength to forcefully expel the demon's sunflower sword intent that had entered his body. Then, the threads of true chi and soul power that he purposely spread out around his body were sucked out once more. The degree of borrowing was even greater than before. What surprised Wei Su the most was that Zhongsho's body, which was originally on the verge of collapsing, for some reason, instantly recovered by a large amount. Lightning Phoenix essence? Interesting. Shaking his head, Wei Su broke out into a laugh. Zhongsho's current aura was much stronger than before. However, the gap between him and that Grandmaster expert was still so huge that it couldn't be made up for. However, at this moment, he could be considered to have barely understood Zhongsho's rough limits. As expected from a talent, his sword path was exquisite, following which the sword in Zhongsho's hand was raised up once more and pointed forwards. An evil smile appeared at the corner of his lips. The sword in his hand was still blazing hot, a golden light shining, lightning snakes dancing about. However, moments later, there were some differences. A majestic will that was as heavy as a mountain suddenly descended upon the mountain peak, covering an area with a circumference of 10,000 feet. Oh, this is the mountain river sword intent. Wei Su's hair and beard instantly shook, pretty much standing on their ends. The Confucian temple above his head tilted once more. He hurriedly reached out to support it. Comprehending sword was not a big deal. Mastering multiple sword wills, he only thought that Zhongsho was precocious and was one step ahead of others. However, merging 2 completely different sword intents into one was incredible. It was far from as simple as comprehending a few sword essences. At this moment, Zhongsho seemed to have merged the 3 sword intents into one. Even though he already knew that Zhongsho's cultivation technique pointed directly to the origin of Sword Dao, the origin of the heavenly Tao. When cultivated to the extreme, one could display all the sword intents of the various schools. At this moment, he still found it hard to accept. Such aptitude was not something that could be described with the words one with the sword or transcendent. Compared to people who merged spirit and martial arts, he was much weaker. He definitely suppressed the talents of the cloud world. The people in front of Taigang Hall finally felt that something was wrong. He only felt that the sudden pressure was about to crush this Xian mountain. From time to time, the entire Taigang Hall would emit cracking sounds. If it wasn't for Xianyuan Tong protecting it, it would have broken. Even then, some people couldn't take it, blood seeping out from their noses and mouths. Helplessly, they hid within Taigang Hall to hide. As for people like Zhu Junho and Luo Xian, their mouths were agape as they looked at Zhong Shou, who was close to going berserk. Thinking to himself that the last time he drank, he merged spirit and martial arts. This time he merged several types of sword intents into one. Great Sun Sword Intent, Mountain River Sword Intent, no. There was also Maniac Lightning Sword Intent. There were actually 3. This young city lord, how'd he do it? Did he succeed just by getting drunk? However, once they were drunk, they would go crazy. Although Zhong Shou's current situation was no different from going crazy. When the sword intent pressed down, even the black shirt old man's expression turned cold. He held his 2-finger sword, 2 black-colored sword shadows circling around his body. Then, everyone looked at the tip of Zhong Shou's lightning-winged sword. A vast sword glow spat out, spreading out 6,000 feet. There wasn't any strategy, nor was there any sword technique. He directly slashed down, slashing at the head of the black-shirt old man with the strength to tear through the air. Then, the sword chi crisscrossed, and the sword shadows that were like light and lightning fiercely and swiftly slashed out one after another, like a torrential storm, continuous and unending. The entire space started to shake once more. The sword energy that spread out was several times more intense than before. Wei Su sighed inwardly, feeling rather regretful in his heart. At this moment, Zhong Shou's strength was indeed more than 10% stronger than before. However, this sword technique seemed really clumsy, not as exquisite as before. He was probably so drunk that he was about to lose consciousness, only knowing how to do things based on instinct. No matter how talented he was, after his brain became muddled, it wouldn't show. If he knew that this would happen, he wouldn't have let this Zhong Shou drink. If not, this battle would be much more exciting. He felt that if the sword energy continued to strike, nothing would happen to the Grandmaster expert. On the contrary, this mountain was about to collapse. Wei Su injected a wave of true qi into his feet. Instantly, it caused the loosened Xian mountain to silently become firm once again. Xianyuan Tong, who was frowning and struggling to maintain, looked at Wei Su with a weird expression. He was slightly shocked, but also slightly at ease. This person who called Zhong Shou Jr. brother and came here with Zhong Shou wasn't a normal person. To instantly stabilize the mountain was much harder than destroying it. His strength was definitely really strong. If he connected to his close observation, Zhong Shou seemed to be borrowing external strength. This person's realm was far from what he imagined. With this person here, he would be fine today. However, what he cared about and worried about more was still Zhong Shou. He also felt regret in his heart. He should have thought that the merging of spirit and martial arts after drinking was just a coincidence. Why was he so sure that this fellow would be able to merge spirit and martial arts after drinking? Tens of swords crossed in the air. The black shirt old man mocked. Make you angry? So what if you're angry? With just this little ability, what can you do to me? Unfortunately, you were born 10 years later. If not, I would definitely avoid you. If I wasn't drunk, I would find it a little problematic. You killing those few useless disciples of mine isn't a big deal. However, since Kuei Chi died in your hands, today I will rip your body into 10,000 pieces. A sword swept out, dissipating all the sword glows in the sky. Zhong Shou didn't give up, still sending out a vast sword glow. directly slashing down. The black-shirt old man scoffed coldly in his heart, a cold glow flashing at the tip of his sword. His eyes locked onto Zhongsho's throat. However, the sword glow that he originally didn't care about suddenly crazily swelled when it was right in front of his eyes. In that instance, it occupied his entire field of vision. Without any signs, the sword glow suddenly charged up to 9,000 feet. Not only did the sword speed increase, but the destructive power within also increased by several times. The old man couldn't care less about locking onto Zhongsho's throat. In a hurry, he could only place the two-finger sword in front of his body. Kong! Hong! There was a metallic sound that sounded like wrought iron, followed by the sound of thunder. The entire peak of Xian Mountain seemed to have been swept up by a tornado, energy crazily shaking. The huge Taiging Hall was suddenly crushed by the pressure. The sharp ringing sound pierced the ears of everyone below the ascended realm, causing blood to seep out from their ears. When the dust and smoke dissipated, one could see that the black-shirt old man was smashed into the ground by this sword. Even with Wei Su's reinforcement, a deep crater with a radius of 10,000 feet was still formed. That old man was in a bad state. In the air, one could hear Zhongsho's muffled laughter. Who told you to be arrogant? Cutting off your balls in exchange for such little ability. What are you being arrogant for? No, you don't have any balls. See if I don't smash you to death. As expected, another sword slashed down, like the sunlight seeping in from the dense cloud layer. A golden sword chi wrapped in lightning suddenly broke through the smoke and dust that filled the sky. The sharpness wasn't obvious, but it was as heavy as a hammer as it smashed into the hole once more. Come! That black-shirt old man wasn't able to get up in time. He had no choice but to use a sword to block. The huge and unblockable power smashed his body into the deep hole once more. The old man's mind was at a loss. He couldn't think of how Zhongsho's strength would suddenly explode. Moreover, it increased by several times. Was he hiding some strength before? That was impossible. Then he must have eaten some pills. If there was such a pill in the world that could increase one's strength by several times, then he also wanted it. In the next instance, he felt that Zhongsho's situation wasn't right. That true chi and soul power were surprisingly in harmony. It was as if they had fused into one. In the next instance, Zhongsho's third sword, fourth sword, fifth sword, sixth sword. There were no tricks and no skill. Sword after sword smashed over. Only each sword was faster than the last. Each sword was heavier than the last, so fast that he couldn't react. So heavy that he couldn't block it. The deep hole that the black-shirt old man was in continued to expand. Over and over again, he was smashed into the ground by that heavy sword. Furthermore, he could sense with his spiritual perception that the soul power and true chi had completely fused together, becoming a single entity. The old man's heart was ice-cold, sinking to the bottom. This was actually spirit and martial arts merging into one. On the ruins of the Taigang Hall, those 10 grade 6 experts were all dumbfounded, looking on as Zhongsho waved that 900-foot Great Sun maniac lightning sword energy, domineeringly smashing that black-shirt old man's body deeper and deeper into the hole. As for Xin Yuantong, although he had to go all out to protect the people behind him, he was still laughing. However, he laughed heartily. He was incomparably delighted and also indescribably proud. Spirit and martial arts merging into one. Spirit and martial arts merging into one. He finally saw it. As expected, after drinking it could help Zhongsho. This fellow finally did it. Filled with confidence, Xin Yuantong's chin was raised up high, looking down on everyone. The person who used a sword to force a grandmaster into such a state was his son-in-law. Zhu Junho and Luo Xian both laughed, although the two of them had personally witnessed it the last time. However, seeing others being beaten up and themselves being beaten up was a totally different experience. Wei Su in the distance had his eyes open wide. He was startled on the spot. The wine bottle in his hand suddenly fell out of his hand. Before it landed on the ground, it was smashed into pieces by the wind. Chapter 282. Spirit and Martial Arts Merging into One? Wei Su was slightly shocked. His heart lost its rhythm, suddenly fast, and then slowed down. He was extremely focused, carefully sensing and identifying the portion of true chi and soul power that was borrowed. It actually didn't touch Zhong Shou's body. It had already merged into one, totally merged. If this portion was because he had already merged spiritual cultivation and martial arts into one, then Zhong Shou could easily do it. Then all the powers in Zhong Shou's body were harmonized. It was a sign that they were about to merge into one. There was not the slightest bit of conflict, nor the slightest bit of disharmony. No matter what aspect of performance, it matched the standard concept in his heart. Soul power and true chi mixed together, causing Zhong Shou's strength to suddenly increase by several times. Spirit and martial arts merging into one. Wei Su was startled once more. He nearly forgot to maintain the mountain body below. Only when he felt the ground shake did he come back to his senses. Just a slight step forwards caused the entire mountain body to stabilize once more. Speaking of which, I have profited greatly this time. Thinking about the sect leader who gave up on the Kenzo sect, Wei Su didn't have any mood to gloat. He was on the same level as that person. Wei Su, had actually misjudged. He really misjudged. 14 years old, Xiantian, 2 meridians, night wandering realm, sword path 1 with the spirit. One more phrase was added at the back. Spirit and martial arts merging into one. What kind of monster was this? Was the heavens protecting the monster race, not cutting off his life force? Thinking about it for a moment, Wei Su could only sigh. Master's wife, your spirit in the heavens is protecting me. No matter what, I found a top legacy disciple for you. Please bless that in the future I, Wei Su, won't be beaten up by those few senior brothers. At the center of the mountain peak, there was another explosion. The black shirt, old man's hair, and beard were in a mess. His entire body smashed into the ground. 7th sword, 8th sword, 9th sword, 10th sword, like smithing iron. Following the inertia, sword after sword smashed down. There were no changes at all. The black shirt old man's face was gold purple. No matter how he dodged or moved, how he tried to block, he was still unable to dodge and block the sword energy smashing down on him. As for that damn kid above, with every breath that passed, he became more and more harmonious. Spiritual energy and true chi. The power of the sword chi would naturally increase as well. He could feel that this kid's true strength wasn't even at the ascended realm. He didn't know why his body hadn't collapsed when he was only at the earth wheel level and was able to control power that exceeded his limit by more than 10 times. Then he was shocked. Why hadn't this mountain collapsed? Where did this Zhong Shou borrow such shocking power? His consciousness was already icy cold, but at this moment he was even more shocked. Pretty much all their spiritual senses gathered towards where Wei Su was standing. In the next moment, he didn't care. He directly dove into the depths of the ground and hurriedly fled into the distance. You want to escape? Zhong Shou stepped in the air. His drunken eyes opened wide as he saw the black shirt old man suddenly disappear into the hole. He was instantly furious. I haven't had enough. You aren't allowed to escape. He waved his sword down, the sword glow spreading out close to 10,000 feet. The lightning-winged dragon snake's aura suddenly soared. Its originally 1,000 feet long body also expanded in an instant. Exploded 10 times. Fierce aura filled the heavens. A sword waved down and directly slashed into the mountain. Like a sharp blade cutting into tofu, it was so easy. On this mountain peak, it left a 1,000 feet deep sword mark. Smoke and dust spread out. The entire Xian mountain shook once more. The people within the ruins of Taigang Hall were all terrified. They were afraid that this mountain would instantly collapse. In the next moment, there was another loud clang. It was like tens of thousands of intense fire talismans exploding within a mountain. The ground within a radius of dozens of miles was shaking. In the ears of everyone, they could hear a muffled scoff. The current battle was already out of their field of vision. Only a few people with sharp spiritual senses could sense a chaotic aura drilling out from the other side of Xian Mountain. His aura was really obscure, like he was heavily injured. Zhong Shou in the air wasn't willing to stop. It was as if he already knew how the black-clothed old man would react. With bloodshot eyes, he once again dove down in that direction. His eyes were filled with fighting spirit. His entire consciousness was in a mess. The joy of being able to go all out against a strong enemy. The rage of Iran nearly falling into danger because of him. The regret of underestimating the enemy. All mixed together. It caused his mind to be extremely focused. Waving the sword again, until he had no more strength to wave. Even if he knew that the gap between him and this Grandmaster was so huge that he couldn't make up for it, his entire body was on the verge of collapsing, he still wanted to fight. When the 12th sword slashed down, the entire sky of Xian Mountain City was split into two. In his mind, he wasn't willing to hurt the people in Xian Mountain City. The angle he controlled was slightly off, following which there was a huge Kong sound, boundless strength. It caused the black shirt old man's body to fly out of the Xian Mountain City area, explosively retreating tens of miles. Zhong Shou's body was like a shadow as he chased out of the city wall. Wei Su shook his head slightly when he saw that, hurriedly stepping into the air and following closely. He only felt that the amount of true qi and soul power Zhong Shou was borrowing from him was getting more and more. Before this, I thought that his sword technique was getting worse and worse. Now it seems like he purposely did that. The more power he borrowed, naturally it would be harder to control. Using strength and speed to win? It is a little similar to the path that Senior Brother is taking. However, Junior Brother's body was really worrisome. This realm is still too weak. Frowning, Wei Su drew a talisman in the air. Streaks of spiritual light silently flowed into Zhong Shou's body along with the true qi and soul power that was continuously disappearing. Zhong Shou didn't feel anything. The 13th sword, the 14th sword, the wheat fields outside of the city were all flattened. Dirt and sand flew all about. Many sword lights flashed in the night sky. That black-shirt old man originally just wanted to escape and didn't want to fight back. However, every few miles he fled, he would be interrupted by the sword light chasing from behind, forcing him to stop and face the battle. Not far away, the scholarly dressed teen who he couldn't see clearly was really calm as he followed 2,000 feet behind. The indescribable look in his eyes made one feel weak in their hearts. In the end, he couldn't take it anymore. The old man turned around. His face was green, his eyes filled with violence. You want to take a mile when you are given an inch? I think you are asking to die. You really think I can't kill you? Before his words landed, he pounced back along with his sword. In a flash, he was in front of Zhong Shou. Body and sword merged into one, his speed pretty much ignoring the laws of heaven and earth. 10,000 feet was crossed in an instant. Zhong Shaoxin's alarm bells rang out in his heart. A feeling of extreme danger, close to death, spread out in his heart. Quick, really quick. This sword was so quick that it exceeded the limit of his reaction speed. He would definitely die, and his head would definitely be broken. The tip of the sword energy was inches away. In just 1/100th of an instant, it would take his life. At this moment, Zhong Shou didn't even have any thoughts of resisting. Just as the despair in his heart froze, and he was prepared to die, a strong sense of unwillingness rose in his blurred mind once again. Who are you? You are the Sword Emperor Tan Xiao. A lifetime of virtual reality, 9,747 battles, only in the first half of his life. When he started to learn the sword path, he lost 19 battles. From then on, he was invincible and had never lost. This was why the people of the Cloud World saw him as the Sword Emperor. Today, how could he lose to this nameless old man here? Didn't you brag that you get stronger when you meet strong people? How could you be willing to give up on such a small battle? So what if this sword was sharp? If he didn't fight, if he didn't try, how would he know who would win? That gaze of despair suddenly sharpened. Balls of purple lightning danced around Zhongsho's body. On the lightning-winged sword, the originally weakened lightning-winged yang snake started to twist and coil, struggling and dancing. The vast sword energy that surged out stretched to 999 feet before stopping. Although he was definitely not his match, although this sword might be his last. He had to wave it out. Even if he died in the next moment, he had to go all out. Swordsman feared nothing. If he couldn't wave out his sword, then how could he be called the Sword Emperor? What rights did he have to reach the peak of the sword path? An illusionary body seemed to appear around Zhongsho's body. In the last life, in the God Emperor game, that invincible Sword Emperor Tanshio. Heavy sword without a sharp edge. Great technique without skill, slash. He didn't bother about the demonic sunflower sword energy that was inches away, slashing out. The sound and movement of the entire heaven and earth seemed to have disappeared. There was only the sharp whistle of the sword glow and the explosion of the lightning glow. When the sword slashed out, he was already dead, which was why this sword was to die together with the enemy, placing himself in the jaws of death and fighting to live. The black-shirt old man's pupils constricted to the extreme. At the last moment, he pulled out his sword and defended in front of his body. When the two swords clashed, there was unexpectedly no sound. There were only invisible ripples spreading out in this tens of miles of space. The dirt turned into dust. The wheat grass was all smashed into pieces. Even the majestic city walls dozens of miles away were missing a portion. A full few miles of the city walls were totally smashed by the destructive ripples. Only a thin layer was left, and it didn't hurt the people behind. The two-finger sword in the black shirt, old man's hand turned into dust after a few breaths, scattering with the wind and scattering all about. A bloody wound appeared at the center of his brows. His eyes were filled with shock as he looked above. There was also a thin and small figure covered in wounds. His eyes were wide open as he stood firmly in the void. His face was twisted. He was unable to accept that the teen who fought with him for close to 15 minutes only had Xiantian to Meridian cultivation. At the Earth Chakra realm, he was able to force him, who was a 4 Meridian Grandmaster, into such a state. He was so close to not being able to withstand that sword strike. He had almost died here. Chapter 283. At this moment, what made the black-shirt old man feel a chill in his heart was that Zhongsho's body, after going through such an intense battle, still hadn't collapsed. A breeze blew, and the lightning-winged sword in Zhongsho's hand suddenly shattered into pieces. As for the borrowed true chi and soul power, it had completely dissipated. Zhongsho's entire body lost its support and fell towards the ground. Wei Su pursed his lips and immediately stepped into the air. He received Zhongsho's body. Without needing to look, he knew that this little fellow had fainted. To be able to hold on till today was already far from what he expected. Although before this, he had used a spell to protect Zhongsho's body from dissipating. Wei Su was still a little worried, grabbing onto Zhongsho's wrist to check his pulse. A moment later, he placed down his worries. His heart was still filled with thoughts. Junior brother, do you know what happened today? Even if your sword intent merged, spirit and martial arts merging into one, it was far from being as surprising as that last sword. An expert wouldn't give up and wouldn't back down. The more difficult it was, the more one's character could be seen. To be able to break through the barriers from heaven without relying on anyone. A wide path appeared in the ravine filled with thorns. Facing such a desperate situation, he was able to toss aside life and death to die with the enemy. Instead, he slashed out a sword that far exceeded his standards. At this moment, Zhongsho might not be considered an expert. However, his heart was extremely strong. His talents were strong, and compared to normal people, he had an advantage. However, if he didn't have a matching will and heart realm, he would disappear from the masses. Be it the sword intent merging or the spirit and martial arts merging into one, it wasn't as surprising as that last sword. He had indeed earned a lot this time. He had earned a treasure for their Tsang Shengdao. That Kinzo sect leader would regret it in the end. The black-clothed old man looked at the two of them from afar. The thought of killing Zhong Shou and eliminating all future troubles flashed through his mind. Without hesitation, he turned around and continued to flee. His figure seemed to fly as he covered 100 li in an instant. Wei Su didn't care at all, slightly raising his hand and sending a few spells into Zhong Shou's body. A few more golden needles pierced out and sealed Zhong Shou's vital acupoints, until Zhong Shou's body was mostly fine and there were no future problems. Only then did he raise his head and look at the figure that was gradually disappearing into the distance. His eyebrows twitched as a cold sneer appeared in his eyes. "Who allowed you to leave?" As soon as these words were spoken, the entire plain, with Wei Su as the center, began to freeze. In the blink of an eye, it had spread over 100 miles. The black-clothed old man's figure also abruptly froze in the air without any suspense. At this moment, the entire world suddenly changed. A blazing sun was in the sky. Below was 10,000 miles of yellow sand, extremely hot. The black-clothed old man was stunned, following which he felt like he couldn't even move a single finger. His aged face suddenly started to distort, changing the sky and changing the earth. "You are a celestial realm expert. You should have thought about it earlier." Only with this level of strength would he be able to borrow a little bit of power. It would allow Zhong Shou, who was only at the Xiantian realm, to be able to jump 10 grades and go up against him, following which he felt that it wasn't right. He remembered that Song Xingdao used the Great Sun Sword intent. Apart from one person, there was no one else. The black-clothed old man's heart trembled once more. Deep despair flowed in his chest. "You are Wei Su, the great sun knife, saint from 8,000 years ago. Song Xingdao revered one Wei Su. You are right. Unfortunately, I can't let you live." Wei Su laughed involuntarily. He didn't make a move. The blazing sun in the sky slashed down with a blade light, causing the old man's body to instantly turn into black charcoal before shattering into black dust. It was as if he was playing it down, as if he didn't even need to use any strength to kill the martial saint expert. Wei Su was about to head back to the peak of Xian Mountain. However, he suddenly stopped and looked not far away. Zhong Shou's lightning-winged sword had shattered, but that lightning-winged yang snake didn't disappear along with it. Although its body had shrunk, it was still 3,000 feet long as it circled in the air, like it had a will that wrapped around him and Zhong Shou. It wasn't willing to scatter just like that. It actually advanced. The body of the spirit beast actually opened up its spirituality once more. Wei Su's brows rose up in surprise. Casually reaching out, he grabbed the lightning-winged yang snake in his hand. When this lightning snake's body spread out, it was huge. However, when Wei Su grabbed it, it shrunk into a small snake and swam around his fingertips. At this moment, this beast should belong to the demon and demon category. However, it didn't have Yin attribute. Instead, it was Yang. Wei Su just needed to slightly investigate, and he knew the reason. Zhong Shou merged his maniac lightning sword intent with his great sun sword intent, as well as that unyielding while during the intense battle. Who knows how, but it stimulated the core of the lightning-winged Yang snake. Coincidentally, their attributes were compatible, making up for the missing part of the source of this spirit beast. It also absorbed a portion of Zhong Shou's blood, allowing it to evolve. Even when it was alive, it was only grade 5. However, after this battle, it charged to the peak of grade 6. Telepathic connection. Natural protector beast? Hey, what good luck. Since that is the case, why not let me help you out? Who knows if he was praising the luck of this lightning-winged Yang snake? Or was he feeling emotional about Zhong Shou's good luck? Anyways, Wei Su didn't think much, flicking out 3 drops of green-blue liquid into the body of the lightning-winged Yang snake. In an instant, the lightning snake's mind shook and its body became more solid. The shining purple lightning became denser and denser. Wei Su waved his hand and temporarily kept it into his sleeves. He also kept the 9-Qilan sword. When the sword entered his hand, his face smiled. Wanxiang descendant. Interesting. following which he stepped into the air and returned to the peak of Xian Mountain. Just as he stood still, he saw Xianyuan Irin run over with tears in her eyes. She wanted to pick up Zhongsho, but when she looked at Wei Su, her eyes flashed with respect and hesitation, not daring to get close. Wei Su couldn't help but pout. He didn't have any hobbies to continue hugging a guy, casually tossing Zhongsho's body to Xianyuan Irin. His eyes were like a torch as he stared intently at Xianyuan Tong. City Lord, since you know about spirit and martial arts merging, then you should know that this matter isn't small. There are only 1 or 2 people in the world with such talent. Once it spreads out, it will cause a huge commotion. Why do you want to force him to use it today? Xianyuan Tong's body turned solemn. He could feel the seriousness of this teen. He knew that if his answer today couldn't satisfy him, the outcome would be unpredictable. Luckily, he was prepared and didn't need to think too deeply, directly asking, "Young master called Shou, junior brother, it seems like he has already joined Song Xingdao." Wei Su didn't agree or disagree, still listening quietly, only to see Xianyuan Tong smile. "I don't know what identity young master has. However, since young master can bring little Shou to travel 2,000 miles in a night, it shouldn't be such a small matter that you can't suppress. Before this, I helped him hide it. However, I don't want his elders to not know his true talent and randomly teach him, even underestimating him." Wei Su's face relaxed slightly, following which he asked curiously, "Then why did you let him drink? Is there something mysterious about the wine?" "No, my daughter's wine is really normal and it tastes really bad." Not caring about his daughter's face, Xianyuan Tong smiled helplessly. Last time in Taiying Hall, when Shou used spirit and martial arts merging for the first time, he was drunk. After he was drunk, only then did Wei Su understand. If that was the case, then no wonder Xianyuan Tong wanted Zhongsho to drink. At the beginning stage of spirit and martial arts merging, the most important thing was to do it unintentionally. If one purposely did it, one wouldn't be able to enter. At this moment, Zhongsho had already stepped into that door. Every time he completed it, it would cause the true qi and soul power in his body to merge by a little. In the end, when it was totally merged, he could casually use it without any worries. Xianyuan Tong's method was the most suitable way to deal with it. Who would have thought that a martial artist born in a small place could actually have such knowledge? In the next moment, he was deep in thought as he looked at Lisina. It was said that this woman came from the demon sect in her early years. She betrayed the sect and joined with Xianyuan Tong. She was probably the only one who knew about this. With a smile on his face, Wei Su flicked his finger and a dozen or so light shadows shot out, pouncing towards the dozen or so people present. These Xian Mountain City experts didn't even have time to form a consciousness to resist before they all fainted. Xianyuan Tong frowned, wanting to block, but he only felt that the space around him was locked by some unknown power, unable to move at all. Don't worry, it is just temporarily wiping away their memories. It was also quite beneficial to their cultivation. With how smart the city lord is, he knows that we can't take this risk. Casually explaining a few sentences, causing Xianyuan Tong to calm down. Immediately after, Wei Su looked around. The entire peak of Xian Mountain was in ruins. It was not far from collapsing, following which he stepped down heavily. This region was rapidly returning to its original state at an astonishing speed. The indented sword wound continued to heal, and all the dust and smoke dissipated. The ground rose up by 100 feet. Those shattered green stones were all gathered together once more. They were even as perfect as before, without any cracks at all. Even the destroyed Taigang Hall rose up from the ground once more. The layout was no different from before. Wei Su looked around carefully, then turned his head and asked Xianyuan Tong with a smile, "Is there anything wrong?" Xianyuan Tong was speechless. Such close to retracing everything was better than the heaven and earth-changing technique from before. How is this Zhongsho's senior brother only at the celestial realm? Wei Su turned his eyes towards Zhongsho. He saw that Xianyuan Irin was using a special medicinal oil to rub all over Zhongsho's body. Then, she continuously patted and massaged. Wei Su smiled. As expected from a most talented pill refiner in the cloud world in these 10 years, she was good at medicine. With her taking care of him, it saved him a lot of effort. Following which his eyes turned deep and indiscernible. Since he already knew the true limit of Zhong Shou, then his original plan needed to be changed. Chapter 284. A ball of lightning was spinning around the fingertip of his right hand. Along with Zhong Shou, who was deep in thought, he subconsciously moved and jumped around. Occasionally, it would give out a crackling sound. That was the dust in the air being blown apart by the lightning. This was that lightning-winged young snake. An hour ago, when he woke up from his unconscious state, he was still in a daze. Wei Su casually threw this little thing to him. He said that in the battle before, he only received 23 swords from the black-shirt old man before he lost and fainted in front of this grandmaster expert. As for his Thunderwing sword, it had become one of the sacrificial lambs. Wei Su saw that the artifact spirit of this sword was not bad, so he casually grabbed it to help it evolve to a peak grade 6 spirit beast. His senior brother's ability was indeed great. However, thinking about his defeat, Zhong Shou couldn't help but shake his head. 23 swords? It was similar to what he had expected, even exceeding his expectations. However, after drinking, he still couldn't do it. The calculation he was best at was, he couldn't use it at all. Moreover, after the matter, he didn't remember anything. It wasn't helpful for him to study the sword path and reflect on himself. Xinyuan Tong said before that when he fought, drinking more wine would be beneficial for him. However, he didn't know what the benefits were. He said that it could help him comprehend spirit and martial arts merging into one. However, how was such a state so easy to comprehend? Who knows where Xinyuan Tong got the basis for that? If it could really help, then wouldn't all the drunkards in the world be able to do it? He broke out into a laugh. Coincidentally, an explosion sounded out from his finger. Zhong Shou was startled awake, following which he looked deeply at the lightning-winged yang snake in his hand. It had lightning and fire-sun power in its body. This fellow was the nemesis of all grade 9 and below spirit beasts, as well as those evil spirits. However, what surprised Zhong Shou was that this thing actually became his natural protector beast. The telepathy between them was even stronger than his first. In theory, Little Gold, which was his life protector beast. They were close to sharing one body. He had no idea how Wei Su had done it. Natural protector beasts didn't occupy the position of a spirit master's protector beast. They were the dream beasts of all spirit masters. The benefits were not limited to this. Innate protector spirit beasts would never betray him, and after subduing them, he would not have to worry too much about them. In the future, as long as the master's realm increased, these natural protector beasts would also be stimulated and promoted. As long as he provided some help, he would be able to raise his cultivation base. As for this lightning-winged yang snake, who knows what methods Wei Su used? His life force surged, as if he were about to reconstruct his body. Xiao Jin, who had returned to his arm, was the same. Something must have been done to it. In the past, Xiao Jin was like a leather bag that was almost full after being squeezed with all kinds of things. Although his power was rapidly replenishing, his body was about to explode. However, the feeling she gave him now was completely different. The leather bag had been replaced with an iron can. Not only was it much sturdier, there was no need to worry about it breaking. The space within had also expanded by over 10 times. As long as he went back and captured a few spirit veins, it would be able to evolve again. Is this one of the benefits of joining Tsang Xingdao? It was not bad. Following which, Zhong Shou sent his consciousness into his body and looked within himself. He could clearly feel that his life force potential and essence energy were exploding out. The battle with the Grandmaster had pretty much ignited his body, squeezing out large amounts of potential. The Lightning Phoenix essence was also largely merged into his body. His cultivation could only stop at 2 meridian, which was why a large portion of it merged into his body. Roughly estimating, even if he didn't use true chi and purely used his body, he could still use 120,000 kilograms of strength, no less than a mid to low-grade martial ancestor expert. The lightning phoenix essence that he absorbed was less than 30% of the original amount. Probably not long later, he wouldn't need to seal it anymore. This should be one of the benefits that Wei Su gave him. Zhongshou knew that receiving the 23rd sword in front of that Grandmaster was far from enough to develop his body to such a level. The effect he was experiencing now was as if an expert several levels higher than him was punching him with great force, helping him temper his body. With Wei Su's Saint Realm cultivation, as long as he helped a little, he would be able to benefit greatly. Feeling great, Zhongshou opened his eyes, smiling as he kept the lightning-winged yang snake into his finger. Only a shallow, rune-like mark was left on his index finger. A natural protector beast could merge into one's body. This protector beast, is not bad. In the future, will have the potential to transform into a dragon. Possessing the power of lightning and fire, it will definitely be a top dragon type. In the future, I will call it Little Lei. Little Lei, sitting opposite him, Xianyuan Irin, who was looking at Zhongshou with concern, was speechless, her jade-like forehead filled with black lines. Little Gold, Little Lei, Little Ji, Little Yao. Zhongshou, why did you use the word little when you name it? Forget it, this name is not bad. Zhongshou was instantly delighted, following which his expression dimmed. This time I am useless. Zhongshou, have dragged all of you down. Before he finished, Xianyuan Irin reached out and covered his lips. Her eyes were like water, filled with a little bit of blame. Zhongshou instantly kept his mouth shut, knowing that the reason why Xianyuan Irin was annoyed at him wasn't because of this matter. Only then did he say the word dragged. However, with a hu sound, he spat out a mouthful of turbid air. He blamed himself. If it wasn't for Wei Su coincidentally coming today, he didn't dare to imagine the outcome. He really underestimated this chaotic world where sex ran rampant and killed people without blinking. He also underestimated these demon sections. The viciousness of their actions were far from what the demon sex of the future could compare to. Following which he felt happy. With such a wife, what more could he ask for? He wanted to make use of this chance to continue talking to Irin. 1,000 feet away, Wei Su suddenly spoke. I gave you time to rest, not for you to talk about love. If you are ready, then you can leave. Zhongshou was speechless, taking out an intricately carved wooden hairpin from his sleeves and sticking it into Xianyuan Irin's hair. At most in 10 days to half a month, I will bring people to the cloud ocean. Xianyuan Irin was about to speak, but when she heard those words, she calmed down, her eyes filled with joy. Gantia Mountain City was going to hunt under the cloud ocean, so naturally they had to go to Xian Mountain City. Zhongshou pinched Irin's soft cheeks before nodding towards Wei Su. The latter smiled, waving his sleeves, causing the space in front of Zhongshou to change. His body was still floating in the air, roughly 20,000 feet. In front of him was another mountain peak. However, he was unable to see where he came from. He only knew that there were many mountains nearby, so he should be deep in the mountains. Zhongshou was startled. He thought that Wei Su wanted him to return to Tsang Shengdao's main sect, one of the mysterious 5 vast habitats. In the end, he appeared in such a place. Although the spiritual energy density here was not bad, no matter how he looked at it, it didn't look like a vast habitat. Senior brother, where is this? Zhongshou raised his head, trying to deduce the position of the stars. His brows furrowed. This direction seemed to be east of Donglin Cloud Continent. Where else can it be? Naturally, it is the Sudia Mountain Range near Cloud Saint City. You have stayed nearby for a long time. Zhongshou's brows rose up. He still didn't understand. Then, he heard Wei Su look into the sky. That year, Demon Mountain Sect was surrounded by many sects and fled Donglin Cloud Continent. Hiding here to rest up is less than 2,000 miles away from Lingyun Sect Pill Spirit Mountain. Zhong Shaxin was instantly enlightened. Shortly after, he was shocked as he looked at Wei Su with a look of understanding. The latter nodded his head. Junior brother, Do you think that I purposely lured Kuei Chi out and waited for him to attack before interfering? Why? If I wanted to help you, I would have directly killed him. Wouldn't that be much better? Zhong Shou smiled. Before this, he did have some doubts. Before this, Wei Su spent so much effort to use him as bait. However, he wanted him to deal with Kuei Chi and that black-shirt old man. This made him feel really weird. He really couldn't understand why Wei Su did that. Because I have a reason, a righteous cause. Only then can I have no worries about killing people. Since they offended the direct disciples of Song Xingdao, they should be prepared to have their sect wiped out. If I don't uproot this Demon Mountain sect and wipe them out, I won't be at ease if you stay in the cloud world alone. Speaking up to this point, Wei Su suddenly stomped heavily on the ground. Instantly, there were many ripples in the air. A series of exploding sounds rang out one after another. The scene below suddenly changed as well. All of a sudden, the balls of spiritual light dissipated. A large, exquisite building suddenly appeared in front of Zhong Shou's eyes. Zhong Shou was first shocked. He didn't sense anything about the illusionary realm before this. Then, his eyes directly landed on a mountain gate halfway up the mountain. Demon Mountain Sect. These 3 words jumped into his eyes. On the mountain peak, there were instantly dozens of furious shouts. Many spirit masters all rose into the air. Those martial cultivators all gathered in groups of 3 to 5. However, they were all spread out, their expressions wary and wary. There was also a dark and solemn voice that suddenly rang out. "Who are you? Why are you attacking my demon mountain?" A chain claw shaped like a skeleton's hand reached out from a valley. It spread out 1,000 feet and struck towards where the 2 of them were. Wei Su didn't bother and continued to step down. More than 10 mountains nearby began to shake violently. The mountain peak where the Demon Mountain sect was at first spontaneously formed a resisting force to resist. However, in just a moment it collapsed. The entire spiritual formation swiftly collapsed. All the buildings on the mountain peak were instantly smashed into pieces. Be it those spirit masters or martial cultivators. No matter how high or low their cultivation was, they all spat out mouthfuls of blood. They spat out mouthfuls of blood as their bodies collapsed. Their bodies were completely reduced to dust. Zhong Shou's eyes constricted slightly. This strike was really overbearing. He personally witnessed 2-day wandering spirit masters and 3 ascended ancestors being smashed into pieces by Wei Su's foot. That giant chain ghost claw was also forced back by this huge strength. Chapter 285. In just a single breath's time, the entire Demon Mountain sect was completely destroyed. The hundreds of people here were all wiped out, and no one survived. Only within that valley, there seemed to be a few people left. The owner of the giant chain ghost claw cried out in pain. However, it was obvious that he didn't have enough energy and was heavily injured. He didn't have the courage to fight back against Wei Su and could only use the help of the spiritual formation to continue to defend. He raged, "Who are you? What grievances do you have with my Demon Mountain sect for you to be so vicious and use such heavy methods to wipe out my sect?" Wei Su chuckled and didn't bother to answer. His eyes were focused on the darkest part of the small valley as he teased Zhong Shou. "I remember that during these few thousand years, when Demon Mountain sect was at its peak, it wiped out numerous sects and massacred all around the central continent, killing no less than 10 million people. Now, it actually had the right to say that others were vicious. Wasn't that amusing? One could see the true faces of these so-called sect cultivators. When they were strong, they didn't talk about logic. When they were weak, they would grumble about how unreasonable others were. Forget it. This is the pot calling the kettle black. If I, Song Xingdao, am weak in the future, who knows what will happen? Oh, this mountain gate spiritual formation was built well. There must be a celestial realm expert who helped to build it." Just as he was about to step down, he suddenly felt the clouds in the sky rumble. The white clouds in the sky turned into a thick black color. Zhong Shou instantly felt his hair stand on end as he felt several extremely strong, intense descend on this place. Wei Su seemed to have expected it. his lips curling up. They came so quickly. Before his words landed, a man in a Taoist robe appeared in the clouds and looked down on the two of them. White hair and white beard, looking like a celestial, he gave off a celestial aura. However, the thing behind this person had nothing to do with the word celestial. A demon cloud surged. The cries of countless babies could be heard, and one could vaguely see people drowning their babies, killing their children, abandoning them, aborting them, and all sorts of unethical and tragic things flashed in the clouds. The white-bearded Taoist first took a closer look at Wei Su, as if he couldn't tell who was better. After taking a deep breath, he didn't attack. Instead, a demon cloud spread out and protected the valley below. I am Venerable Demon Ing, the Cloud World Demon Alliance Elder. Forgive me for not being able to recognize you. Who knows how the Demon Mountain sect offended you? He only knew that 99% of the disciples of the Devil Mountain had already died. No matter how great the grudge was, it was time to end it. Please be magnanimous and leave this bloodline for my Devil Alliance. How about it? Wei Su's expression was indifferent. He didn't comment and just waited quietly. After that, a few more powerful wills began to descend. However, those who were slightly weaker were all repelled by a tyrannical force and were unable to approach. In the sky, a total of 6 wills above the celestial realm mixed together. Wei Shucai suddenly stomped his foot again, and the rolling demonic clouds that were still monstrous a moment ago were immediately pressed down by a tyrannical force, and all of them disintegrated. That white-bearded old man spat out fresh blood. He suddenly became dispirited, shock appearing in his eyes. Venerable Demon Ing? I have never heard of you. What thing actually dares to stop me? Song Xingdao. Who cares about your demon alliance? I will wipe out this demon mountain sect. He was pretty much expressionless. Behind Wei Su, a ray of sunlight shone down and shot into the valley. Everything here started to melt. First was the remaining spiritual formation, which totally collapsed. Then, the buildings and stones all turned into lava in just a few breaths. Several cries of death rang out. In less than 3 breaths of time, the people inside were all killed. Zhongsho's brows furrowed. He felt that there was no more aura on the mountain peak. He thought to himself that this Wei Su looked gentle and polite, but who knew that he was so domineering when he did things. Within this valley, a grade 9 spiritual grandmaster fell on the spot. It was said that any cultivator who stepped into the celestial realm, once they entered the cloud world, 99% of their strength would be locked. No matter how strong they were outside, within the cloud world, their combat strength would only be slightly stronger than a grade 9 spiritual grandmaster. However, this gap was a little too huge. Zhongsho even suspected this conclusion that had been around for a long time. Did these experts make a mistake? The few strong wills in the sky didn't interfere at all. That was until Wei Su wiped out the entire Devil Mountain sect. At this moment, an old voice said, "Great Sun Knife Technique. Speaking of which, you are Wei Su of the common people's throne?" Seeing that Wei Su didn't speak, it meant that he admitted it. That voice spoke up once more. "I heard that you entered the Saint Realm 6,000 years ago. Your talents are really amazing. Your master didn't misjudge you. However, your way of doing things is too arrogant and vicious. I think that the moment you entered the Saint Realm, you forgot your place. You forgot what kind of place this cloud world is. Forgot my place?" Wei Su burst out laughing, grabbing out with his palm. A crescent knife suddenly appeared in his hand. He slashed in the air, and the entire sky started to crackle. Zhongshoxin was stunned. When he came back to his senses, he noticed that the entire space had split apart. It was indeed split apart. One could even see many cracks all around. 30 miles out, everything was normal. The trees shook and danced with the wind. Within 30 miles, it was deathly silent, spiritual energy chaotic. Who knows whether or not it was an illusion, but there were a few heavy breathing sounds by his ear. Who knows where it came from? Then he saw Wei Su suddenly keep his knife and put his hands behind his back. Whether or not Wei Su forgot, my place isn't up to you to decide. What do you all think? There was a moment of silence in the sky, and none of the 6 tyrannical wills spoke. A moment later, it was the old man who spoke up once more. So you were half a step to end realm. What a great sun knife saint. He was only half a step away from your master back then. Hey, with such cultivation, you do have the right to speak to the 6 of us. However, this time, you really went overboard with the Demon Mountain sect matter. Celestial martial realm, and above can't interfere in cloud world matters. Even if you have no choice, you can't exceed heaven realm strength. This was the agreement that the 3 saints made with the various sects of the cloud world. Your master is also within. It is best if you give Demon Alliance an explanation. Since the few of us are world venerables, we should be fair and not be biased. Please don't make things difficult for us. Zhongsho's heart was filled with shock. He had confirmed another ancient secret. He had only heard about this matter in his last life. 9 body, chakra, meridians, earth chakra meridians, heaven chakra meridians. Actually, it was the body realm, earth realm, and heaven realm. Body, earth, heaven, spirit, celestial, God, saint, and true 9 realms. Outside of the cloud world, in the higher power system, it was only the lowest 3 levels. Explanation? What explanation? Today, I attacked and wiped out the Demon Alliance. Is that considered an explanation? You all said that it was a mutual agreement. But why is it only temporary in my memory? He felt the aura of the few people in the air stop. Wei Su shook his head. The so-called mutual agreement is to restrict the weak. I, Wei Su, am willing to follow it because of you all. This paper agreement is still useful to me, Song Xingdao. If you aren't willing, then treat it as if it doesn't exist. What can you do to me? Forget it. Let's not talk about this matter today. I will give you all some face. The Demon Mountain sect people offended my direct disciple first. As the senior brother, I will help my junior brother to attack. Exterminating them is justified. I believe that the few of you can also give an explanation to this nuisance demonic alliance. A female voice in the air laughed angrily. Wei Su, you really are reasonable. You said that the Demon Mountain sect offended your junior brother first. But why did I predict that your junior brother was the one who killed the Demon Mountain sect disciples first? At that time, your junior brother hadn't even entered Song Xingdao yet. In terms of logic, it should be your common people sect that was in the wrong. Zhong Shoshin was furious and wanted to explain. Wei Su took a step forward and arrived in front of venerable demon infant. Just as everyone didn't understand what was going on, they saw Wei Su slap out with a palm, heavily smacking the white-bearded old man's face. It caused this expert, who was at least celestial realm and above, to be smacked away, falling down the mountain like a shooting star. When he landed, there was a loud explosion, causing dust and smoke to fill the air. Then, they heard Wei Su laugh coldly. In the wrong? That might not be the case. My Song Xingdao's logic is that only we are allowed to bully others and no one is allowed to offend us. Just now, I slapped this venerable demon baby. Now you ask him if he dares to slap me back? The logic is the same. My junior brother, not to mention killing the outer sect disciples of the Demon Mountain sect. Even if he killed their sect leader, they would have to bear with it. If they can't, then wipe them out. You. That girl was instantly furious. In the end, she scoffed coldly. How unreasonable. Do you really think that just because you're half a step to end realm, others can't do anything to you? A sword light suddenly slashed down, shocking the world as it suddenly entered this space that was separated from the world. Wei Su laughed out loud. Behind his head, suddenly a ball of sun floated up. With a wave of his sleeves, he forcefully dissipated the sword light. Zhongsho's brows furrowed. His forehead was covered in cold sweat. Why were there so many experts in the cloud world? Even if his cultivation was low, he could see that the sword contained the mysteries of time, space, life and death, start and end, etc. It far exceeded the realm that he could understand. As for Wei Su's slap, although it was done casually, it also contained a supreme ability. Great Sun Vast Spirit Disc. You actually succeeded. No, there's also the Song Shengdao Spiritual Talisman. His voice suddenly stopped. The six spiritual senses instantly became silent. There was no sound at all. The entire space fell into a dead silence. Do you really think that I didn't make any preparations when I returned to the cloud world? Wei Su said while the sun image behind him slowly dissipated. With my master's example, Wei Su doesn't dare to be careless. I have always kept in mind the grudges between me and all of you. I have never forgotten them. Chapter 286. With my master's example, Wei Su doesn't dare to be careless. I have always kept the grudges between me and you in my heart. I have never forgotten. Even as the words left his mouth, more cracks appeared in the world that had been separated from the outside world. A portion of it even spread into the mountain below. The giant mountains here were all sliced into pieces. A moment later, the old voice spoke once more, this time with a bitter smile. If your master was alive and knew that he had such a disciple, he would be really happy. However, what happened that year has nothing to do with the six of us. Who knows? In the future, the truth will come out. Wei Su's voice was really casual. As he spoke, he patted Zhongsho's shoulder. This is my junior brother. Although he hasn't officially entered the sect, in the future, he will most probably be the seventh direct disciple of Tsang Shengdao's second generation. Today, I used this Demon Mountain sect to draw the six of you out. I want to tell you all, don't try to play any tricks on my junior brother. Don't force me, Wei Su, to go crazy and not bother about anything. Shut up. This time the voice was really majestic. He was around 40 years old, and his voice was filled with rage. As world venerables, how can we do such despicable things? The six of us can live our lives magnanimously. We won't do anything against our conscience. Wei Su, your words are dirtying our ears. Is that so? Wei Su smiled without caring at all. It is better if you don't. All right, there's also my Tsang Shengdao. Do you really think that I, Wei Su, don't know about all the dirty tricks that the six of you have used these few thousand years? Don't think that only the Kinzo sect head will be angry at you all. If you make me, Wei Su, angry, I can also tear down your nest. Those few powerful wills were all enraged. Their spiritual senses fluctuated continuously. A moment later, they all scoffed coldly. They all retreated their intents from this space. Moments later, the entire 1,000 miles of space finally calmed back down. As for the space that had been split apart, it rapidly recovered. However, the giant mountain that had been split open by the crack could no longer be restored. Just as Zhongsho was looking at his senior martial brother with an almost worshipful look in his eyes, Zhongsho's expression changed. At this time, Wei Su raised his hand and wiped the cold sweat on his forehead. He sighed and said, "It's really not easy to scare these six people away. Today's show was quite dangerous." Zhongsho's gaze turned to confusion. Wei Su didn't keep them in suspense, shaking his head as he explained, "These six people are old antiques that have existed since the Cloud Desolate era 10,000 years ago. They were the only ones who weren't restricted in this realm. Although I'm not afraid, I can still win. However, if he really fought with them, he would definitely be in big trouble in the future." Yet he had no choice but to lure them out and meet them. It's because you can hide your matter from others, but you definitely can't hide it from them. Therefore, he had to intimidate these people and make them shut up. The more outstanding your cultivation is in the future, the more difficult and dangerous your situation will be. That's why I brought you here. Zhongsho didn't really understand, but he could only nod his head. However, he did understand what she meant when she said that he couldn't hide it. Just based on that female voice saying that he killed people first, he knew that these few people knew about his situation like the back of their hands. However, as for the identity of these six people and why they called themselves world venerables, he still didn't understand. He only knew that since they could make Wei Su feel worried, then they were definitely people of the same level. Even in his last life, the matters that he couldn't understand in this era, after adding in these six people, suddenly had an explanation. Wei Su didn't need him to understand, saying expressionlessly, "Today's action is also for Tsang Shengdao's 3 sects and 6 schools. You should know that people like us have always been seen as evil by the demon path. However, we also see the demon path as enemies. Due to that huge battle a few thousand years ago, our relationship with the sects is cold, and our situation is worrying. If you become Tsang Shengdao's disciple, your future path will be extremely tough. The dangers are far greater than you can imagine. This is why I will ask you one more time. Are you willing to join my Tsang Shengdao? If you aren't willing, then I won't make things difficult for you. I will recommend a good teacher for you and form a good relationship. Zhong Shou blinked, not knowing whether this Wei Su was being sincere or not. For him, he had already fought with the Kenzo sect for close to half a year, even giving up on a true dual cultivator genius. At this time, he said that he could let go. How was that possible? If he said he wasn't willing, then he would slap him and smash him into meat paste. This kind of probing method was a little too low. I know you don't believe me, but these words come from the bottom of my heart. Only Zhong Shou's face was filled with disdain. Wei Su couldn't help but laugh helplessly. Do you want me to make another soul oath? Actually, in my case, for a disciple like you to join willingly and not hate the sect, that is the most important thing. In terms of talent and whatnot, he is actually at the bottom. Zhong Shou thought about it for a moment, not agreeing or not, only hesitating. I can't learn your Tsang Shengdao's doctrines and theories, and I'm not willing to learn them. You don't need to learn them. Wei Su had expected this. His tone was a little dejected. My Tsang Shengdao was created by Master Shizi to make everyone equal. However, today, the sect isn't pure anymore. Within a sect, more than half of the disciples join the sect for power and cultivation. It's okay if you are one more. I only hope that in the future, you follow the sect rules, and when Tsang Shengdao is in danger, you can help. Samurai's eyes lit up. If he wanted to learn the doctrines and theories left by Shizi, then he would rather kill him. This senior brother Wei Su was really good at understanding people's hearts, and it seemed like he was really sincere. He calmed down slightly, following which he spoke of the second matter. After joining, I want to see all the scriptures of your sect and the 3 sects and 6 schools. Wei Su nodded his head once more. Of course. Even if you aren't willing, I will pile up those books in front of you. Will Zhong Shou force me to do something against my will? No, I don't know about the other 3 sects and 6 schools. However, Tsang Shengdao's sect is where everyone is equal. Everything we do is based on our hearts. Senior brother, do you have the confidence to maintain the reputation of Tsang Shengdao? Not follow the example of Demon Mountain sect? Demon Mountain sect? What is that? Wei Su understood what Zhong Shou meant, mocking himself. Your senior brother still has that bit of confidence. Zhong Shou instantly pursed his lips and smiled. Then why wouldn't I, Zhong Shou, be willing? Wei Su instantly laughed out loud and said, good. Then he slashed forwards with his hand, slashing open a crack in the void as he walked in. Zhong Shou didn't hesitate and followed in. Just as the crack was about to disappear, a person suddenly stepped out from the foot of the mountain. His expression was dark and sunken, filled with endless vengeance. However, just as this person was about to fly away, all of a sudden, a vast force surged madly in this space. It directly smashed his head and body into pieces. The moment his soul left his body, another golden flame rose up. It also burned his soul into ashes. At this moment, Zhong Shou was already within a huge hall. From the looks of it, they should be in an ancestral hall. However, the inside was abnormally spacious. Above, there were thousands of tablets carved on it. In the middle was Tsang Shengdao's ancestor Shizi. To the right was another tablet that was on the same level as him. His identity should be really respected. However, there was no name carved on the tablet. It was totally blank. There was no one here, but it was really clean. Incense wrapped around it. Wei Su lit up 3 incense sticks and passed them to Zhong Shou. Then, he led him to the front of the empty tablet, saying seriously, Junior brother, please kneel 3 times and kowtow 9 times. Zhong Shou was speechless, thinking to himself that his dead master didn't even have a name. His face was really solemn as he bowed 3 times and kowtowed 9 times. Then he stuck the incense into the three-legged golden cauldron in front of the tablet and said, "Disciple Zhongsho greets Master." Weisu nodded his head slightly and bowed too. He straightened his body and said, "The ceremony is complete. From today onwards, Junior Brother is the seventh direct disciple of my Tsang Shengdao sect." When he heard those words, Zhongsho was startled. Was the initiation ceremony over just like that? He originally thought that this ceremony would be solemn, and some people would be invited to watch, right? No matter what, he was someone from the Tsang Shengdao ancestor generation. If it was Ling Yun's sect or other righteous sects, they would announce it to the world. Weisu didn't explain, first forcefully drawing out some blood from Zhongsho's wounds. Then, he took out a golden talisman and wrote Zhongsho's name on it, as well as his birth date. Then, this talisman burned without any wind, turning into a ball of spiritual light that gathered above. Zhongsho took a look, only to see that at the dome, there was a golden talisman floating in the air. At this moment, it was flipping open one by one. Along with the spiritual light seeping in, a new page was formed. On it, there were the words Lin Xuanshuang Eldest, Disciple Zhongsho. Below it were his birth date. This golden book was really thin, only 240-odd pages, and his page was ranked 17th. This is my Tsang Shengdao sect's treasure, the mysterious golden life book. As long as one's name is recorded, no matter where one is, as long as one doesn't die on the spot, one's soul will be destroyed. One can use the power of this book to prevent one's true spirit from dissipating. If the golden page isn't damaged, an end realm expert is willing to use their essence energy to control this book. One can even go against the heavens and revive one's soul. Apart from that, it can also warn that anyone who is in the sect is heavily injured or dead. As for the other sect members, no matter how far they are, they will be able to sense it and head over to help. I remember that when Tsang Shengdao was at his peak, this golden book had 499 pages. Now half of it is gone. Most of the remaining 200-plus pages had already been completed. The fellow Taoists that Master had gathered back then were either dead or scattered. Less than 10% are left. As he said that, Weisu frowned. "I said too much. Why am I telling you all this?" "Junior Brother, remember, Lin Xuanshuang is your master's name, and also the wife of teacher Shizi. The current Seven Spirits sect and Taiyuan sect were all created by her sisters. Roughly 2,200 years ago, news of her death spread out. The only fortunate thing was that the golden page in the book didn't collapse. However, the true name dissipated and turned into an empty page. Once more End Realm and even true realm experts appear. They will help her summon her soul and rebuild her Tao body." Chapter 287. Samuraim's eyes flashed as he bowed towards the empty tablet once more. He finally understood why there wasn't a single word on the tablet. So his master actually had a chance to revive. Based on what he knew, Tsang Shengdao had dozens of known Saint Realm experts in this era, so there were definitely End Realm experts. Why didn't anyone help? Doubts surged in his heart, but in just an instant, Zhongsho suppressed them. Although this mysterious golden life book had the ability to summon souls, it would consume a lot of energy. With the current situation of the common people path, if they didn't have one or two End Realm experts that they could take out, their foundations in the cloud world would instantly collapse. This cloud world was different from the world he came from. In the 10,000 years of the Cloud Desolate era, there were simply too many experts that appeared. Apart from that, there was also Wei Su who said that this mysterious golden life book recorded Tsang Shengdao's core disciples. He also said that less than 10% of them remained. Then, even on a rough estimate, there should be less than 50 of them. No wonder Wei Su's expression was so sad. Tsang Shengdao's situation wasn't as glorious as it looked on the surface. Looking at the golden book in the air, Zhongsho was speechless. This thing was indeed not ordinary. As long as one kept a bit of their soul, they would have a chance to revive. It could indeed be called a top treasure. Apart from a mysterious golden life book, there were dozens of other treasures here. Zhongsho looked at them one by one. Each time he looked at one, his heart would jump intensely. All of them were huge treasures of power. Zhongsho had even personally seen a few of them in the God Emperor game. Players naturally had no fate with treasures of such a level. Without exception, they were all in the hands of game characters, making one drool. Then his eyes were attracted by another item beside the golden book. It was a really weird-looking sword, 7 feet long and a pale gold color. The spine of the sword was really thick, and the sword body was covered in layers of scales. Apart from that, there was nothing special about it, no spiritual energy reaction at all. However, it could float in the air and was placed in the center of the many tablets in the ancestral hall. He also couldn't describe what he was feeling at this moment. Anyways, after he saw this sword, he couldn't shift his eyes away. Since the battle 8,000 years ago, your master has been all alone in the world. Sometimes, his whereabouts are even a mystery. She only entrusted me with all her treasures and secret techniques to help her search for a successor. However, these two things are too early for you. When the day comes when you're able to step into the immortal martial door, I will pass those things to you one by one. Although you don't have a master, the heads of Taiyuan and Seven Spirit sects will definitely treat you as a direct disciple and take care of you. If you have any problems in the future, you can find them. Master's wife and the ancestors of these two sects are really close. When Wei Su said that, he noticed that Zhongsho behind him was distracted. Frowning, Wei Su couldn't help but laugh and explain, "This is one of the 7 celestial swords that Master refined in the past." Based on what she said, if one day the 7 swords could be merged into one, that would be the time when I, Song Shengdao, would rise up once more. My 6 senior and junior brothers all got one. Only this God-refined sword is left. Within Song Shengdao, no matter what realm one's cultivation is at, one is unable to make it yield and use it. There were even many people who suspected that this sword had not been refined at all, and that it could only be left here for the future generations to be fated with. As long as one is a direct disciple of the sect, one will have a chance to get it. Only then did Zhongsho come back to his senses. After he heard that, his eyes lit up. However, a moment later, Wei Su poured a bucket of cold water on him. However, such an important treasure of the sect can't be easily given to others. My disciples have to at least reach the celestial realm and have the ability to protect themselves before they can try to take this sword. If not, with such a treasure, it would be useless. Instead, it would cause trouble. I advise you not to think about this thing now, although you can take this sword after you reach the celestial realm. However, those few senior brothers and I were only able to make the other 6 swords yield after we reached the Saint Realm. As for this God-refined sword, even End Realm experts have no way to do anything about it. What he meant was that this fellow shouldn't bite off more than he could chew. Unless he reached the Saint Realm one day, he shouldn't even try. Zhongsho laughed bitterly. Saint Realm? End Realm? One day, he would reach the Saint Realm. Who knows how long that would be? However, why do you have a weird feeling at this moment? He always felt that this God-refined sword was connected to his mind. As long as he touched it, or even just a thought, he would be able to make it yield. The moment such a thought rose up, the sword that was covered in scales suddenly jumped. Zhongsho blinked his eyes and looked carefully. However, he saw that the sword was really calm. His brows instantly furrowed. He probably saw wrongly. Thinking about it, if the sword really made any movements with Wei Su's cultivation, he definitely would have noticed. Then he heard Wei Su laugh. Speaking of which, I forgot that I haven't given you this gift. Whilst he spoke, a golden light suddenly rose up from Wei Su's sleeves. Zhongsho wanted to reach out to receive it, only to see the light directly drill into his head. It was nowhere to be seen. Before he was able to take a close look, 2 more yellow lights flew over. Zhongsho thought that these 2 things would also enter his body. Only when they got close did he realize that they weren't. In a panic, he grabbed it in his hands. Looking carefully, he saw that it was a token and a jade letter. He didn't know what the jade letter was for, only that it was crafted from jade stone and the quality was really good. The spiritual energy within was even stronger than when the 9 Qilin sword was repaired by Little Gold. As for the token, it wasn't weaker than the former. It was even more exquisite. On the surface, it looked like a really normal grade 3 spiritual artifact. It should be a sect keepsake with the name and identity carved on it. However, when his spiritual sense entered, he could clearly sense that there were other mysteries within. However, the complexity of the spiritual formation exceeded that of the 9 Qilin sword. Zhongsho took a look and was even more confused. Taiyuan sect direct disciple Zhongsho? What is the meaning of this? Wei Su smiled and didn't reply, only slightly nodding his head. Why don't you try to use it? Zhongsho was confused, trying to inject soul power into it. Then, the tokens suddenly changed one by one. First, it was Zhongsho's name. Then it changed to Zhang San, Li Si Zhao, duh. Even his identity as a direct disciple of Taiyuan sect was constantly changing. Inner and outer sect disciples, even direct disciples of elders, Seven Spirit sect, Taiyuan sect, he could do whatever he wanted. Then, when Zhongsho activated the core spiritual formation within, Zhongsho was shocked. He could clearly sense that his face was covered in a thin layer of spiritual energy. Although it wasn't a face-changing item or an illusionary technique, it could cause others to be unable to remember what he looked like. This item, along with his Sky Fox illusionary technique, would definitely have a miraculous effect. This item can enter and exit the various sects as you wish. It can also help you hide your identity. The Gantian Mountain Monster King is the 7th direct disciple of my Tsang Xingdao sect. If the Donglin sects knew about this, they would probably be suspicious. Wei Su pointed at the jade letter in his hand. As for this item, it was specially crafted for you. It can gather spatial energy to store as long as you are still in this world. Every 10 days, you will have a chance to teleport 10,000 miles into my common people's vast habitat. There are no restrictions on where you can use it. I have already set you at Gantian Mountain. At most, it can store spiritual energy for 3 teleportations. However, the greatest use of this item isn't that. Zhongsho's brows furrowed, replying without hesitation, naturally, it is to escape. He held the jade letter tightly in his hand. This item was indeed precious to him. It was like having a few more lives in his hands. Wei Su instantly smiled, his eyes showing that this kid could be taught. When Zhongsho was teleported by Wei Su once more and returned to Gantian Mountain City, the thick night sky hadn't even dissipated. The morning star in the sky had just appeared. When he returned to the warm room, he saw that the 4 women were still waiting for him. When Zhao Yanran looked at him, her expression was extremely strange. His eyes flickered between green and white. In the end, he snorted and walked out of the warm room without even saying goodbye. It was likely that this woman would not be able to open her mouth to speak with that title. Xian Yunlan also had a weird expression in her eyes, but she was much more respectful than Zhao Yanran. Seeing Zhongsho, she bowed respectfully and said, "Disciple Yunlan greets Senior Zhongsho." Zhongsho chuckled. Zhongsho nodded his head in satisfaction. However, he immediately felt that this word was too troublesome. He had goosebumps after hearing it. He then generously waved his hand and said, "Just call me Junshang from now on." Xian Yunlan was silent, thinking to herself, "I'm not your subject. Why do I have to call you ruler?" Then, he looked at Zhongsho with a pleading look. Zhongsho didn't know what she meant. Only after a while did he know that Xian Yunlan wanted to leave. Although Gantian Mountain City wasn't a large sect, it was still one of the strongest powers in the world. Especially at the peak of Gantian Mountain, within the Hanyan Palace, experts were as common as clouds. At night, the security was even tighter. Without his orders, Xian Yunlan probably wouldn't be able to leave. Using his soul to sense, as expected, Zhao Yanran didn't leave and was waiting outside. Zhongsho smiled faintly and waved his sleeve at Chu Shui. "Shui, send them down the mountain." Chu Shui originally had a stomach full of questions and wanted to ask. At this moment, Zhongsho directly sent her away. She was instantly unwilling. Unwillingly, She led Xian Yunlan away. Ruo Shui smiled and understood that Zhong Shou probably needed a period of time to be alone. Not waiting for Zhong Shou to speak, she walked out of the warm room. However, she didn't leave just like that. Instead, she waited outside to protect. Just as the four of them left, Zhong Shou directly sat cross-legged on the ground. He adjusted his breathing and entered meditation, sending his intent into his soul ocean. The first thing he had to figure out was what that ball of golden light was. Chapter 288. Before Wei Su left, the only thing he didn't explain was the ball of golden light that entered his soul ocean. When Zhong Shou used his spiritual sense to investigate, he only felt that above the soul power whirlpool, there was a 9-story golden pagoda floating. It was above those few true spiritual talismans, suppressing his entire soul. Zhong Shou tried to send a thread of spiritual sense in. Then, he was totally startled. He could clearly see this 9-story golden pagoda. However, when his spiritual sense got close, he noticed that this thing didn't exist at all. An item given by a Saint Realm expert definitely wasn't ordinary. Just from a token jade letter, he knew a thing or two. However, what was this 9-story golden pagoda? What was its use? There didn't seem to be any changes within his soul. If he had to say something different, it would be that it was more stable. No, stable? Zhong Shaoxin's heart moved slightly as he spread out his spiritual sense. Then, a smile appeared at the corner of his lips. He saw that the holes around his soul that were on the verge of breaking were being strengthened and restored under the buff of an external power. Some of the wounds were also healing. The entire process was extremely slow. If it wasn't for Zhong Shou purposely paying attention, he wouldn't be able to notice it. The treasure that Wei Su gave him was actually a rare item in the world that could heal the soul. In order to completely mend his Yuan spirit that was on the verge of shattering, the time needed could be calculated in the units of 10 to 100 years. However, Zhong Shou at least saw a bit of hope. Moreover, the strengthening of his soul by this golden pagoda was something that he could clearly sense. He didn't need to worry about the terrifying consequences of his soul ocean whirlpool breaking. He didn't need to worry day and night. Zhong Shou wasn't able to find out the deep functions of the pagoda. However, to be able to know this was enough. However, thinking about it carefully, the 3 spiritual artifacts that Wei Su gave him couldn't be used in battle. The teleportation jade letter could allow him to teleport between Gantian Mountain and common people's vast habitat. When in danger, he could escape. As for the token, other than being used as a sect token, it was also used to conceal one's identity. If he was willing, then even if it was a stage 9 spiritual martial saint expert, they might not be able to remember his true appearance. As for the 9-story golden pagoda, he could only throw it into his soul sea and ignore it. To him, these 3 items were all very useful. However, it didn't help him increase his combat strength. Frowning, Zhong Shou took out a fist-sized pouch from his sleeve. This was also the small Qinquan pouch that Wei Su had given him before he left. He had been envious of it for a long time. Zhong Shou was speechless when he probed with his divine telekinesis. Not only were there no usable spirit weapons inside, there were also very few medicinal pills. The only fortunate thing was that there were only a few dozen medicine bottles inside, and all of them were rare and exquisite. Song Xingdao's exclusive pills were all famous in the cloud world. Even the Pill Fountain sect, which was famous for its pill refining, couldn't compare to it in terms of similar pills. Then there were a few yellow jade tokens, similar in style to the one he had. However, it was empty, and there were no names carved on it. It was the most basic stage 3 spiritual artifact with some defensive ability. Naturally, it didn't have the ability to make one unable to remember one's appearance. There were a total of 4, and their identities were all carved in advance. They were the inner sect disciples of Song Xingdao. Zhong Shou didn't understand at first, but then he understood, scoffing. If nothing went wrong, these tokens were left for Chu Shui and Zhong Yuan. With Wei Su's Saint Realm eyesight, how could he not see that Chu Shui had the potential of a combat martial body? As for Purple Lightning Spear Zhong Yuan, his name was already spread out. He wanted to buy one and get two free, but he didn't even give a decent magical artifact or spiritual artifact. This senior brother of his was really dreaming. He made up his mind to let these tokens not see the light of day. Zhong Shou's spiritual sense locked onto the other two items. The entire heaven and earth bag was roughly 2,000 feet of land, and it was the highest quality. It was similar to a small city, extremely vast. However, at this moment, apart from the few items from before, it was empty. There were only a portion of books piled up in a corner. At the very top were two purple gold secret manuals. They were different from the other books. Only these two books contained spiritual energy and didn't look like ordinary items. One was the Insight Mysterious Lightning Body Training Art. The other was the Great Sky Changing Meditation Technique. With a thought, Zhong Shoksan took out these two books and placed them outside of the heaven and earth bag. With just a quick look, he found that the two secret manuals were each locked by a spiritual energy. If he forcefully opened them, it would cause them to self-destruct. Frowning and thinking about it, Zhong Shou took out his sect token. Placing it on the book, as expected, a purple light flashed and the book automatically opened. The first thing he flipped open was the Insight Mysterious Lightning Body Training Art. The first line of words on the first page made one's heart stop. Who knows who wrote it, but the handwriting was shockingly sharp, killing intent filling the heavens. This manual is the highest body training technique of the Tsang Xingdao. The direct disciples of the sect can learn it. The core disciples of the other factions in the common people's path need the permission and guarantee of the sect elders before they can cultivate it. If any of the inner sect disciples privately teach or pass it to outsiders, they will be killed without mercy. Zhong Shou's eyelids jumped as he flipped to the next page. In just a moment, joy appeared on his face. What was recorded in this secret manual was an extremely unique meditation technique, named Spirit Microscopic Meditation Technique. It could allow one to enter the microscopic realm in a short amount of time when looking at one's body. This visualization technique could be said to be unique. However, since this book was called a body training art, its main use was naturally to train the body. The so-called Spirit Microscopic Meditation Technique was just a support technique. It allowed one to borrow the power of lightning to train and stimulate the body. Based on the explanation on the first page, this book could be listed as a grade 10 Saint Spirit cultivation technique during the Cloud Desolate era. In the Tsang Xingdao, it indeed had the rights to be listed as a top body training book. Zhong Shou instantly let out a groan. In his last life, he had spent a lot of effort. After reaching the Ascended Realm, he found 2 grade 7 legendary grade and 1 grade 8 earth-crushing grade cultivation technique for himself. Now that he had joined the sect, he could easily get his hands on the 10th grade martial arts manual, using the power of lightning to train the body. 10,000 years later, there were people who tried to use the power of various machines to do it. However, the main point of this method was to have a detailed understanding of each and every part of the martial artist's body, even the condition of each cell. At least in his technologically advanced era, no one had truly succeeded. The most important part of this martial path secret manual was this Spirit Microscopic Meditation Technique. Naturally, this technique had strict requirements. One had to have a strong consciousness and extreme control of the power of lightning. With his conditions, he was just right. Zhong Shou's memory was shocking. In just a moment, he memorized the entire contents of the book. However, he suppressed the urge to immediately try it out, taking out the Great Sky Changing Meditation Technique in his hands. The previous body forging formula had already surprised him greatly. As for the latter book, Zhong Shou naturally had more anticipation. After flipping it open, it still started with the warning to kill without mercy. It was also a top-secret manual that only the direct disciples of the Tsang Xingdao could cultivate. Zhong Shou eagerly flipped to the next page. He glanced at 10 lines a glance, swiftly browsing through his memories. Then, the joy in his eyes grew thicker and thicker. This book had nothing to do with the martial path. It was a meditation technique for spirit masters. It was the same saint spirit level as the insight mysterious lightning body training art. The biggest difference between this spirit master secret manual and those normal meditation techniques was that when one cultivated this method, one couldn't strengthen the spirit master's sense of one or several elements of heaven and earth spiritual energy. Instead, it would improve the spirit master's soul, working on the essence to strengthen one's talents and greatly increase one's calculation and deduction ability. Even when one's deduction ability was strong enough and the quality of one's soul reached the day wandering realm, one would have an ability to replicate, instantly copying spells and secret techniques, even martial path intents. It could be used by both enemies and allies. As long as it didn't exceed one's grade, there wouldn't be any time difference, which meant that this method could be used in battle. Thinking about it, when the enemy used spells or secret techniques, he didn't need to form seals, talismans, or other preparations. He just needed to use his soul to sense and directly copy it. He placed these two secret manuals back into his small heaven and earth bag. Then, a struggling expression appeared on Zhongsho's face. A moment later, he sighed and took out the two yellow jade tokens. On it, he carved the names Su Chu Shui and Zhong Yuan. From today on, these two people could be considered inner sect disciples of Tsang Xingdao's sect. If they could enter the Ascended Realm, they would also have the right to enter the mysterious life golden book. From this, one could see how much Wei Su valued these two people. Zhongsho gritted his teeth in hatred. He originally wanted to threaten and bargain with the sect to get some benefits. However, Wei Su just simply threw out two secret manuals, and he could only submit. This insight, mysterious lightning body training art, and the great sky changing meditation technique were both suitable for him to cultivate. However, looking closely, it seemed like Wei Su specially chose cultivation methods for Zhong Yuan and Chu Shui. What Zhong Yuan cultivated was a lightning element cultivation method and comprehended the maniac lightning spear sense. Using the insight mysterious lightning body training art, his strength would definitely increase by leaps and bounds. Although Chu Shui had the combat martial body, she couldn't just rely on her instincts to fight. The great sky changing meditation technique could change her spiritual cultivation talent and also increase her calculation ability. In the future, she wouldn't be unable to learn even a slightly deeper talisman, which was the right thing to do. He was the second generation of Tsang Xingdao's sect, the seventh direct disciple. After entering the sect, he would automatically have the identity of an elder. As long as these two people became inner sect disciples, and he vouched for them, they would meet the conditions described on the first page of the secret manual. If one said that it was a coincidence, Zhongsho wouldn't believe it even if he was beaten to death. This senior brother of his was really good at scheming. He scoffed coldly once more. Zhongsho hesitated slightly before taking out a yellow jade token and carving Zhong Ruoshui's name on it. Chapter 289. In an unknown space-time gap, a black-clothed young man with a cold expression and a long sword on his back was standing proudly in a dark area of chaos. Like he was waiting for someone, a cold glow flashed in his eyes. A short moment later, a figure suddenly appeared. He looked young, wearing a white Confucian robe and a Confucian crown. It was Wei Su who had just separated from Zhongsho. The moment he appeared, he noticed the presence of the black-shirt teen. He stood in the void, confusion appearing in his eyes. "Are you senior brother Mingyu?" Wei Su's eyes were like candles. If he was willing, he could light up a world. However, in this place, it was really tough for him. A moment later, he confirmed the identity of the black-shirt teen. He heaved a sigh of relief. I was wondering why those 6 people were scared away so easily. So was senior brother protecting them. "Thank you." The black-robed young man snorted coldly. However, in the end, he walked out from the darkness and stared coldly at Wei Su. "You also know that those 6 people are tough to deal with?" I remember Master said that unless the 7 swords are gathered or Tsang Shengdao is in danger of dying, otherwise, the 6 of us can't step into the cloud world. Those words are still ringing in my ears, but 8,000 years have passed. Junior brother, did you forget those words so quickly? I didn't forget. Junior brother has to go. Wei Su laughed bitterly, seeing Mingyu's annoyance grow thicker. He reached out, and an item appeared in his palm. It was covered in white light, and one couldn't see what was within. Senior brother, don't be annoyed. Junior brother is prepared this time. With this item, I might not be able to beat those few End Realm masters. However, if I use it to escape, no one will be able to stop me. I don't even care about those 6 old antiques. The black shirt teen took a close look, and his expression relaxed. His brows rose up. Then, the disciple you accepted on behalf of Master's wife, our 7th junior brother. What kind of talent did he have to make you take such a risk? Senior brother already knows? Just as he asked this question, Wei Su saw the black-clothed youth in front of him point at the space between his eyebrows. He immediately swallowed the rest of his words. This question was indeed stupid. Zhongsho's name was on the mysterious Golden Life book. How could his senior brother, who was so close to the cloud world, not sense anything? After thinking about it carefully, Wei Su decided not to tell the truth. If Ran was telling the truth, perhaps today, the 2 of them would have to fight immediately. He could only say vaguely, "Of course it's excellent. 7 junior brothers' achievements are probably better than yours and mine. I predict that he will be able to step into the deity realm within 100 years. Become the pillar of Tsang Shengdao. Better than you and me." When the black-shirt teen heard that, he couldn't help but frown. The cloud world is facing the spiritual wave. To step into the god realm in 100 years is not bad. However, there was no need for her to treat him so generously and register him under her name. There is also no need for you, Wei Su, to personally head to the cloud world. Wei Su's eyes flashed, thinking to himself that a step into the god realm in 100 years, such a cultivation speed could only be considered average. However, if this person's sword path was one with the spirit and martial arts merging into one, then he was really amazing. No, he was one of a kind. Even compared to the God Emperor in the future, he wouldn't be much weaker. Although he and his few senior brothers were direct disciples of Tsang Shengdao, none of them had the right to obtain the true legacy of Shizi. During these years, to find a suitable successor for their master, they had searched many worlds, racking their brains every year. If he knew that such a peerless talent had actually been given to his master's wife's lineage by him, one could imagine what the consequences would be in the future. Slightly feeling guilty, he turned his head away. Wei Su suddenly waved his sleeves, and a chessboard appeared in the void. On it, the black and white chess pieces were scattered, and the black side was obviously at a disadvantage. Just as the black-shirt teen had a confused expression, Wei Su finally opened his mouth. When I received the letter from the cloud world, I was playing chess with that person. At this moment, I took the black chess piece first. The eyelids of the black-shirt teen jumped, thinking to himself that this was a tragic sight. It was obvious that a huge dragon had been slaughtered by someone. His junior brother was a terrible chess player. He didn't know it, and went around searching for people to play chess with. In the next moment, he saw a white chess piece appear on the chessboard. Wei Su's voice said leisurely, "I was going to lose this game. I was just pestering him. However, that person placed his piece here. It really makes one think." The pupils of the black-shirt teen constricted. What is the identity of that person? Wei Su also knew that this senior martial brother opposite him was not asking about the one who played chess with him, but about the junior martial brother he had recently accepted. There was no need to hesitate. His name is Zhongsho. His current identity is the Monster King of Gantian Mountain. He controls Donglin Cloud Continent, a monster race power. Gantian Mountain? The black-shirt teen seemed to have heard of this name before. He was stunned, but that Zhong Weiran was said to have obtained the Book of Ian Extreme Life and then disappeared in the Oblivion Cloud Ocean. Wei Su was startled. So, senior brother has heard of this person? To be able to chase the daughter of a Liu family, how would I not know this person? The black shirt teen's expressionless face actually revealed a smile. I have some connections with this matter. Thus, I paid a lot of attention to this zone we're in. The rumors of the Book of Ian Extreme Life are definitely fake. However, this person might not have died in the Oblivion Cloud Ocean. That place is said to be a dead land, but as long as one grasps the method, one can enter and exit freely. When this Zone Show entered, did he ask you to help him investigate the Oblivion Cloud Ocean? No. Maybe he didn't know that his father didn't die. Wei Su's brows furrowed slightly, but in just a moment he placed this matter down. He asked curiously, I know senior brother Mingyu's personality. Today, you definitely wouldn't come to meet me just to ask about junior brother Zone Show. Is there something else? The black shirt teen nodded slightly, his expression serious. Not long ago, I sensed something. That god-refined sword seemed to have some movement. When I charged into the cloud world, there was no movement from the sword, which is why I wanted to ask junior brother if you sensed anything. Wei Su was startled once more. He definitely wouldn't suspect that what Mingyu sensed was an illusion. However, at that time, why didn't he sense anything at all? God-refined sword out, blood washing. This was the sword that his master had prophesied, the sword that could allow common people path to enter a prosperous state once more. Was there already someone who could obtain it? Who was that person? This is our Gantian mountain cloud ship? When he asked that question, Zhong Shou was standing on a pier by the shore, quietly observing the giant ships floating in the cloud layer. The pier was made of wood and stretched out from the shore. Below them was the thick, rolling clouds and mist, as well as the bottomless evil land. If one fell from here, one would instantly be smashed into pieces. However, the entire cloud ocean gave off a repulsive force. As long as one didn't exceed a certain weight, one could float above. This place was known as Rainbow City, located in the northwest of Donglin Cloud Continent. It was the biggest port in these thousands of miles. Its scale was no weaker than Gantia Mountain. It was only 1,000 miles away from Gantia Mountain City and was one of the 10 cities directly under Gantia Mountain. The trading tax from the port each year took up a 20th of Gantian Mountain's annual tax revenue. As the buoyancy here was really strong and the terrain was just nice to avoid storms, it was also the intersection of several reliable trade routes, which was why merchant ships gathered here. The ships that sailed within the Cloud Ocean were split into two types. One was mostly simple spiritual formations and relied heavily on the buoyancy of the abyss. It was a ship that commoners often used. However, there were many places in the Cloud Ocean where the buoyancy force was constantly changing. Sometimes it could push the ship 10,000 feet into the air. Sometimes it had no buoyancy and would cause the ship to directly fall into the Cloud Ocean. This was why since ancient times, all merchant ships, as well as those ships that hunted cloud beasts, would follow those routes that they had already explored. Even in the future, it was no exception. The other type were those cloud ships with complete spiritual formations. Only such cloud ships could fly freely in the sea of clouds. However, there were really few of them, and each time they sailed, the consumption of mind stones and beast crystals would be calculated in units of one stone. Normal people wouldn't be able to afford it. This was why only some hidden sects were able to have them, or powers like Gantia Mountain would use them as warships to hunt in the Cloud Ocean. In front of Zhongsho was such a type. The biggest one was 200 feet tall and was comparable to a 10-story building. It was also thousands of feet long. There were a total of 250 of them, giving off a majestic aura. 25-toothed giant ships, one of which is the ruler's ship. It is made from floating orchid wood transported from the central continent. Not only is its body as tough as a grade 7 beast, but its buoyancy is also shocking. At this moment, the person who spoke was a teen in heavy armor. He proudly raised his chin. There are also 103-toothed giant ships and 120 assault ships. They can carry 200,000 troops. There are also 150 that need to patrol and can't participate. This squadron was built by the previous ruler when he was still alive. Even compared to Taoyuan City, it isn't much weaker. Zhongsho didn't agree or disagree. Looking at these giant ships and entering deep thought. It wasn't until a crackling sound spread out from his shoulder did he come back to his senses. Looking out, he saw a few large specks of dust being blown apart by the lightning glow around his body. This was one of the side effects of cultivating the insight mysterious lightning body training art. With his current realm, he could barely reach the microscopic realm in his internal vision. However, he was barely able to do so in just a few moments. After each practice, there would be a large amount of lightning remaining which wouldn't dissipate. It would be formed within his body, and he was unable to direct it to dissipate it. Naturally, the benefits were not small. Just 3 times, and his body refinement had reached a new level. That you're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.